Hello, a very good morning, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, and dedicated advocates for climate action. A very warm welcome to each of you. It is an honor to stand before you as your MC for this remarkable gathering. In collaboration with the Malaysia Pavilion at COP29 in Baku, Climate Governance Malaysia proudly hosts Malaysian support for COP29, a virtual forum bringing together thought leaders, innovators, and experts dedicated to advancing impactful climate solutions. This two-week program reflects the Malaysia Pavilion's daily themes, delving into sustainability and reinforcing Malaysia's commitment to a resilient and sustainable future. Malaysia stands at a pivotal moment in its climate journey. The recent launch of the National Climate Change Policy NCCP 2.0 reinforces our goal of a low-carbon economy and net zero emissions by 2050. While Malaysia contributes just 0.8% of global emissions, we recognize our responsibility to drive meaningful climate action. As climate impacts intensify, achieving sustainable growth demands a careful balance between economic progress and resilience. Malaysia, as an ASEAN leader, is poised to strengthen regional collaboration on cross-border climate issues, particularly as we prepare to chair ASEAN next year. COP29 offers a pivotal moment to enhance regional partnerships and drive support for our shift for sustainability, a strategy encompassing policy evolution, cross-sector initiative, and grassroots mobilization toward a low-carbon future. Our commitment to net zero signals to the world Malaysia is prepared to meet any challenge on the path to sustainability. Today's theme, Building Climate Resilience, Sustainable Leadership at All Levels. Amid the complexities of climate action, resilience must be our guiding principle. Malaysia is steadfast in its commitment to resilient growth, harmonizing environmental, economic, and social priorities for a sustainable future. Together, from policy to community action, we are shaping a Malaysia where sustainable practices define urban life, fostering environmental stewardship, equity, and shared prosperity. And now, please join me in welcoming Datin Sri Sunita Rajakumar, founder and chairperson of Climate Governance Malaysia, to share her insights on COP29 with Dr. Gary Theseira, esteemed director of Climate Governance Malaysia. Over to you, Datin Sri and Dr. Gary.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Gary, are you here?
Yes, I'm here. Very good morning, Datin Sri Sunita. It's a pleasure,
Gary.
as always, to be with you.
Absolutely, Gary. This 8:30 session every day is really your session. So we're relying on you to walk us through the complexities, the ins and outs of COP29. What say you, Gary? What are your thoughts?
Right, so once again, we are at the 29th Conference of the Parties to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. Some call it the Climate Convention, some call it the UNFCCC. One C more or less. It's a bit of a mouthful. And the general, for most people, one of the perceptions is that it is one big meeting. But let's begin by clearing the air a little bit on this. The COP is actually a collection of meetings. First of all, there's the 29th Conference of Parties to the UNFCCC, but there is also the 19th Conference of the Parties serving as the meeting of the parties to the Kyoto Protocol. So there are issues that are still being discussed under the protocol, and those will be discussed under the meeting CMP 19 or CMP 19. We are also negotiating issues under the Paris Agreement itself. And so these are under the meetings called CMA 6, or the Conference of Parties serving as the meeting of the parties to the Paris Agreement. And those would be, as it were, the three supreme bodies for both the COP, the UNFCCC, the Kyoto Protocol, and the Paris Agreement. There's also two subsidiary meetings. And one is these subsidiary body meetings. And of course, the first is the 61st meeting of the Subsidiary Body for Scientific and Technological Advice. This is a body that has been constituted by the COP, and its requested to give input, and at the same time, there's other input that comes from the COP that goes back to these bodies for consideration. There's also the subsidiary body for implementation, or the SBI, as it's often known. It's also the 61st meeting of the SBI. And so in conjunction with all these meetings, of course, there will be other meetings, constituted bodies put together by the COP. Some of them are committees, some of them are intergovernmental panels. And so, of course, there's a lot of interaction that goes on at a COP, large or small. Now, this COP is on the scale of things regarded pretty much as a slightly smaller COP. Although the key issue here being dubbed the finance COP is one of the most important and one of the most durable, persistent, and perhaps most difficult issues that we've covered here on climate change, and that is finance. So on the one hand, we have it called the Finance COP, and on the other hand, quite unfortunately, it's been also called the Placeholder COP, given the fact that it's rather small.
Yeah. Gary, I wanted to ask you, before we dive into the finance aspects of it, because of course it's part of that trifecta leading up to Brazil next year, you have represented Malaysia for many, many years, and you know firsthand how difficult it is to get consensus from over 190 countries, right? What are your thoughts on where things have evolved to since you were, knee-deep in the trenches to what you are seeing today? What are your thoughts on that? How are we going to get consensus?
Thank you, Datin. That's a very good question. And once again, it's just my experience as a national negotiator over the space of 14 COPs that I've attended, and a number of others that I've provided input to. But these things tend to be cyclical in nature. It's not a scientific thing, but if you look at the COP, it's been a cycle of as it were COPs where parties unreservedly accept and embrace the outcome of the COP, and it's broadly regarded as a success. On the other hand, there are other COPs that essentially fall through. And an example of one that possibly fell through is the 15th COP in Copenhagen, where the initial $100 million a year pledge was made. On the high side, there are COPs that represent real movement forward. The Paris Agreement, COP29, was certainly one of those. But once again, the COP does not occur in a vacuum. It occurs in the ecosystem of the global political stage. And as with all things, governments, whether national governments, regional governments like the EU, they go through cycles of being very influential and very persuasive, to cycles where, for example, you have the situation in the US now. The unfortunate US negotiators will not be able to speak on behalf of or even articulate the views and positions of the incoming presidency. And this sometimes can render an entire COP somewhat ineffectual, because if countries do not have a clear mandate from their political leaders to take strong positions, clear positions, then it's difficult, because then things have to be put off a little bit. So it's cyclical, and with global developments this year, it seems like this might be one of those COPs that ends up being a wait-and-see COP rather than a COP in which we can finalize key issues that are on the agenda, very important issues that are on the agenda.
I mean, even from the moment it was announced, I think everybody realized this is going to be a small, cold, and very expensive COP. And so we're seeing a lot of heads of state, a lot of business leaders are not actually attending it. So that's already crippling discussions, as it were. But as you know from your first-hand experience, things tend to come down to the wire in the last few hours, isn't it? There must have been really exciting times for you.
Yes, there is always the concept of brinkmanship going on. How far can I push my agenda? How far can I push my national position? Can I push it up against and what I'm pushing against? Who is with me? Who is not with me? When countries go to the COP, of course they have their national positions, but they find out very quickly that the moment they land at the COP venue, the very first meeting that they attend, meetings of the coalitions to which they belong. In the case of Malaysia, of course, we are clearly a member of the Group of 77 in China. That the moment we start talking about a position for the coalition, that immediately countries have to start making choices about what national positions they wish to put a lot of effort behind to try to couch or to try to frame that as part of the coalition position, and which national positions might actually, at best, be somewhat peripheral or perpendicular to a coalition position, or in the worst case scenario, might actually be opposed to the coalition position. In which case, the country is placed in a rather difficult position of trying to decide whether they wish to stick to that national position and essentially potentially break a consensus of all of the 134, as it were, developing countries of the world. All developing countries face these decisions. The added complexity with this is that many of the sub-coalitions of the developing country coalition, the G77 in China, themselves are unable sometimes to agree on positions. And it's not uncommon for a disagreement within the coalition, particularly a diverse coalition. As example, the Africa group is very diverse countries. If we can't get a coalition in that group or the Association of Small Island States or the least developed countries, any lack of consensus there actually cascades all the way up to becoming a G77 lack of consensus. And that makes it very, very difficult for developing countries to negotiate from a strong and united position. So coming back to your point about brinkmanship and things happening at the 11th hour, that also is not uncommon. For the most part, most COPs have been gavelled through with all parties supporting the outcome. A number of different COPs lately have been gavelled through with countries, leaving some countries essentially behind, vehemently protesting the fact that their views are not taken into account. But as we know, a consensus is not unanimity, and that allows the process to move forward.
Yeah. So back to the finance COP, which we're facing now. So, with this new collective quantified climate goal, developed countries are failing to talk about the quantum. And this is something that's front of and center in the Third World Network's report yesterday, which we are basing this conversation on. But on the other hand, do developing countries have credible transition strategies which also justify the quantum that they're asking for? Do they have access to data where they're making informed decisions? Do they have a technology roadmap? Do they understand what the marginal costs are? So in all, given the current global climate impact scenario, how likely is the NCQG, doesn't roll off your tongue, does it? NCQG. How likely is that to meet the quantum that developing countries say is the minimum to address climate change?
Yes. Yeah, so you speak about the NCQG not rolling off your tongue, but the two words in the name that are not in the acronym are actually climate finance, which is what we're talking about. It's somewhat ironical. But no, you're absolutely right. It's a bit of a chicken and an egg problem. Developing countries have from the outset, and I mean from the outset, as a very diverse group of countries, some of which may have high individual net income, high income countries. Some actually have some of the highest per capita emissions. So it's extremely diverse. And these countries have maintained from the very start that there's going to be a great difficulty in actually executing and actually implementing climate change measures, whether they are mitigation measures or adaptation measures, without the requisite capacity building. So on the one hand, if the NCQG is going to require, and this is one of the things that developed countries have asked for, some kind of earmarking, for example, some conditionality. We're going to provide funding for the NCQG if this happens or if that happens. So if you show us, and so far, you find phrases like in the context of a low carbon emission development plan or things like that, kind of creeping in. So the idea then is that we have someone who has a mic on. Just if you mute that, thanks so much. Yeah. So if countries are expected to already have these processes in place, it's a bit unreasonable. Countries need to be addressing climate change across a broad spectrum, particularly developing countries. Some are just barely setting up a sustainable infrastructure. They still have vast areas of natural areas, wilderness, forests, etc. Some up to 90% or more forests still. And so how do they justly and equitably improve their quality of life? Once again, you can look at things like the 17 SDGs for that. And then at other points, you find countries that have well-developed cities, infrastructure, things that require higher technologies, perhaps at higher cost. But everything needs to be moving in the direction of greater efficiency. And then you will find some developing countries, particularly some of those North African countries surrounding the EU and others that have direct relationships, very close trade relationships with large countries like France, etc., that are very rapidly churning out renewable energy infrastructure. We find countries like China, whose renewable energy capacity alone, I believe, adds up to more than the next 5 countries combined. And so we find that the rates of decarbonization vary in country and by country, and the needs, therefore, of these countries vary. So to try to put a one-size-fits-all framework on top of the NCQG is something that developing countries know will be very, very difficult. Experience from the past with the GEF, with the Green Climate Fund, with the Adaptation Fund and others has shown that complexity is the enemy of fast action here. So one of the things that developing countries are pushing for in the NCQG is simplicity.
Can you help me walk this through? Because I've heard Meena Raman say that NCQG, they're looking at a floor of 100 billion per annum, right? And as we've discussed, developing countries also need to have a good handle on what their needs are. So what do you think countries need to, so in my mind, I'm thinking you need data so that you know what the current state of the land is, for example, what are the real risks that you're facing, so you have a better understanding of direct and indirect data risk. What are the technologies that are going to underpin the transition? And of course, marginal costs. Many of these technologies are not viable at present. At what scale or at what volume do the marginal costs change? But in your mind, because I know you've done a lot of work on JC3's data catalog, what are your thoughts on what is it countries need before they can map out a robust transition pathway? What do you think, Gary?
Yeah, that's also another big question. The needs of countries vary greatly, as I just mentioned, because of the heterogeneity. But given the fact that the data connectivity is now fairly seamless between countries, across regions, etc., we don't need the source of the data or the ability to collect the data to be everywhere. I mean, the countries that have the technology, in some cases, they're not just developed countries, in some cases, they're developing countries, oftentimes are willing to share large quantities of data that are actually useful for planning, for early warning, for strategizing, and in any case, the idea is for constructing these long-term roadmaps that will enable a country to address climate change in the most efficient possible way. And so many times what we find is countries need the kind of technology that allows them to plug into a system of data collection. We see that with entities like the EU Space Agency's Copernicus program, where they actually make data quite broadly available. We also see entities like Our World in Data, who are actually compiling very, very large quantities of information and even processing them, pre-processing them, turning them into more useful metadata that countries can plug into. So what I think countries really need is, first of all, the ability for their human capacity, the skill sets and training to understand and access the data, and then thereafter, the technology, the infrastructure, the hardware and the software that's needed to access all of this information. And then, you know, with the national capacities and with an understanding of the national risk profiles, and given the strategic roadmap that the country wishes to take, given its resources, its strengths, its vulnerabilities, then they can select which data they require and have some sense of comparability across countries, so that even regionally data can be used. I mean, for example, just give you a very quick example. When Malaysia collects sea level rise information, immediately one of the easiest things to do is to share it with Brunei, share it with Singapore, because once again, you know, it's not going to be that Brunei is going to have one rate of sea level rise. It's different from Singapore's, it's different from Malaysia's. Essentially, you know, the ability to share data is important, and so the word collaboration, I think that also is something that is being mentioned not just by TWN's update, but by a lot of updates. We are moving into an era where we need increased collaboration between the developed and developing countries, and even between developing countries themselves.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And last week I was in Singapore for ACGA, the Asian Corporate Governance Association's annual meeting, and Singapore's Deputy Prime Minister Heng Swee Keat was saying that Singapore was looking into scenarios of 5.5 degrees of warming, where a third of land will be underwater, including Singapore. So can you imagine that? I think there's so much potential if we can collaborate on a regional basis. And that brings me to my last question for you today, Gary. Given Malaysia's potential to provide regional leadership in this area, especially as we're currently chair of ASEAN, what common national narrative should Malaysian stakeholders be sharing in the hallways of COP29 to spark renewed interest in climate finance?
All right, so that's another big question, and this is one that we hope will be put to good use and articulated as clearly as possible at the Malaysia Pavilion. So we welcome, you know, if our audience this morning will follow that as well, developments at the Malaysia Pavilion. But I really think that as a country, Malaysia as we know, is extremely blessed. We have ample sunshine. We have the warmth we need for production, natural processes, photosynthesis, growth, etc. But we also have a very rich culture of learning and education that has actually brought us to where we are. I think the sentiment, the overall sentiment within the region, the pillars that put ASEAN together, I think also bode very, very well. As a country, we are unique, perhaps, among countries. I mean, which country can actually point to the fact that after 6 decades, we have a change in government for the first time, and it's completely organized. It's completely without any untoward situations. And this, I think, is a frame of mind that is shared broadly among our ASEAN member states as well. The first response is always to dialogue, to learn more, to share information. And I think that for that reason, the ASEAN region in particular would be a region with great potential to, as it were, implement the climate strategy at a regional level. We have working examples in the EU that we can look to. We have some examples in the Arab states where countries work very, very closely together. And I think that in particular, if you look at the private sector, it's already something that's going on. Banks that long established or originated in Malaysia now have branches, permanent branches in many ASEAN member states. And the inverse is true as well. Singapore businesses, Indonesian businesses are all setting up branches in many parts of the ASEAN region. And what we find is that as we move along, there's greater and greater potential to expand this collaboration into very important areas. Recycling is one of these areas. Upcycling is one of these areas. Biofuels is another one of these areas. At present, ASEAN is a source of the raw materials for many important biofuels, not just biodiesel and HVO, but sustainable aviation fuel as well. And so what is stopping this region from, collectively becoming not just a producer of biofuels for other countries to use, but a hub where we ourselves, ASEAN member states themselves, begin benefiting from these technologies, being able to gradually adjust the pricing on these fuels to where countries in the ASEAN region are actually using these fuels to fuel our own sustainable and low carbon development.
I love that. I love that closing note, Gary. I think it's a great idea that ASEAN steps up, that we lead the way in the thinking to increase our resilience, and as a net exporting region, to increase the resilience of our trading partners as well. I really like that. So look forward to seeing you again tomorrow, Gary, as you unpack this for us every single day. And I'll be in touch soon. Take care.
Take care.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Fantastic conversation to kick off the long week at COP. Thank you so much once again, Datin Sri Sunita and Dr. Gary. As a quick reminder, we'll also commence our daily program with a 30 minutes breakfast chat with Dr. Gary and his guest speaker as he unpacks his daily observations. Next, please join me in welcoming Datin Sri Sunita, Chairperson and founder of Climate Governance Malaysia, to deliver the welcoming remarks for day one. Over to you, DS.
Thank you so much, Sharon. So as you've just heard, we've had this great opening session with Dr. Gary Theseira, also CGM Council member. Climate Governance Malaysia is doing this for the first time because we wanted to democratize access to COP for many, many people who might not have the time or the funding resources to be able to attend this important conversation. And as COP was going to be small, cold, expensive, as I just described, we thought, why don't we run this parallel program that allows so many more different voices to come in and contribute to this conversation? And as you know, CGM is all about capacity building. So everything we do, we try to ensure it's recorded, it's time tagged on our YouTube playlist, there's a transcription, there's an accompanying blog post, speaker slides are shared where they agree to it. So we're here to support your climate discovery journey. So as we know, we are already at 1.65 degrees of warming on a monthly basis. This was the temperature warming for October 24. The 2-year running mean is already at 1.5 degrees. IEA's Energy Outlook 2024 says that Southeast Asia, which is a net exporting region, is the second largest region in growth of energy demand. And so a lot of the solution is going to be coming from this part of the world. A lot of the solutions are going to be coming from the private sector, which means you and I. A lot of the capacity building that is needed with policymakers or regulators and within private sector is going to come from initiatives that we are working on. So I think the long and short of it, what I would like to stress with everybody who's going to be attending this virtual COP and the live stream to the Baku COP is that it's incumbent on every single one of you to step up and to contribute solutions, to be part of the conversation. And, you know, there's no roadmap, there's no silver bullet. I think it's a wide open field. We're also looking at ways in which communities can be more resilient. And remember, even as a business, even if you have award-winning sustainability reports or robust net zero strategies, if the roads are impassable, if your staff can't come into work, if we have no food security, if there's hyperinflation of medical insurance or medical supplies, then your business is going to be on its knees. So no business can be resilient unless your ecosystem is resilient. And that requires all of us stepping up. And there's so many things that we all can do on an individual basis and a household, in your business, however big or small, within your industry, and so on and so forth. You can halve your electricity bill, improve your energy efficiency. You can be far more careful about the amount of water you're using. You can commit to net zero organic waste to landfills, and committing that all your inorganic waste will be recycled as far as possible, and so on and so forth. Some of the things that we will be exploring in the next few months is not just what is the role that we can play within ASEAN as well, but what are the tough questions that we really want to explore? What would the Malaysian economy look like with zero subsidy for fossil fuel? What would that look like? If you could only eat what you can grow, what would that look like? These are really difficult questions, and I'm struggling with it myself. But I think it's a great opportunity for us to come together and to talk about it. What are your thoughts? Do you have any solutions? Volunteer with Climate Governance Malaysia and help us think this through. So as we are preparing for the upcoming COP29, we want to warmly welcome all attendees to this. We are going to have a recap of Third World Network's alerts at 8:30 every morning. The theme for today is Shift for Sustainability, Climate Action Now, Future-Proofing Our Environment. So it's a big theme which is going to capture a lot of things, and we have great highlights for today. I hope you're going to stay on for this because I'm looking forward to it. It's only a half-day program before we hand over to the Baku live stream, but we've got a keynote by Datuk Wira Ismitz from the Institutional Investors Council. We've got a keynote by our favorite international advisory panelist, Thakur, Powdyel, the former Minister of Education in Bhutan. We've got a message from the Climate Governance Initiative in the UK. We have another message from Mariani Ramli, the founder of Gibbon Conservation Society in Malaysia. And then we have the much awaited CEO Action Network panel where you're going to hear from CEOs who are thought leaders in this space and who are also agitating for increased climate ambition. Don't forget to share the live stream for Baku as well. We will be sharing the link for the official Malaysian pavilion and for the website for the schedules as well. All of our sessions will be recorded and made available on our YouTube channel. And please follow our LinkedIn for the latest climate updates as well. And don't forget to register for our CGM newsletter as well. So I'm going to hand it back to Sharon for the keynote speaker. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Datin Sri. It has been a very busy morning for you. Okay, so we shall now continue with our first keynote for today. Let us welcome Datuk Wira, Deputy Chairman of Institutional Investors Council Malaysia, IIC, who is also the Chairman of Malaysia Association of Asset Managers, MAAM. The floor is yours, Datuk Wira. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. It's my great pleasure to welcome all of you to this highly anticipated moment, the COP29. We are standing at quite a critical juncture, and it represents a bold step in our ongoing commitment to climate action. Now, I think as we gather here for COP29, we align ourselves with this year COP29 theme in solidarity for a green world. We stand at a pivotal moment in history, a moment that calls for urgent action, unwavering commitment, and collective responsibility. The climate crisis is no longer a distant threat. It is a present reality that demands our immediate attention and decisive action. We are witnessing the consequences of inaction all around us, rising sea levels, extreme weather events, and ecosystems on the brink of collapse. The urgency of our situation compels us to shift towards sustainability in our policies, our practices, and our way of life. Today, now I urge you to embrace a vision of climate action that is not only reactive, but proactive. One that ensures our planet remains habitable for future generations. Sustainability is not just a buzzword. It is a necessity. It involves a fundamental shift in how we interact with our environment, with one another, and ensuring that we meet the needs of present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet theirs. Many are calling the COP29 the Finance COP, seeing it as an opportunity to align climate finance contributions with estimated global needs. Yet, despite this focus on unleashing funds, nearly every basic element of the new collective quantified goal, NCQG, is still being contested. From the new target and the contributor base to the scope of finance involved and the Paris Agreement articles in question. Over the next few months, attention will need to be focused on creative solutions to these issues. The Global Climate Finance Action Fund mechanism, I believe, will be a centerpiece of COP29 action-oriented agenda, ultimately seeking to turn ambition into implementation. The continued development of the Loss and Damage Fund will seek to identify priority gaps and strategies for addressing them, to ensure that the world's most climate vulnerable populations can be protected through a new and innovative sources of finance. Finance, as can be seen, it is a central theme at the COP29 in Baku against a backdrop of limited progress towards climate transition. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has warned that in scenarios assessed, limiting warming to around 1.5 Celsius requires global greenhouse gas emissions to peak before 2025 at the latest and be reduced by 43% by 2030. The world is not on track to keep global temperatures increases below 1.5 Celsius. Advances towards climate transition have been inequitable, with emerging markets left behind developed market peers in terms of adaptation and transition finance. Stakeholders will also be working towards setting a new climate finance target to support global climate action funding. The 2020 target of 100 billion set in 2009 fell short. A major question for the 198 countries signatories to Paris Agreement remains how quickly they will need to mobilize finance to sustain developing countries, particularly under the NCQG. It is a critical time for investors to bring together their voices and advocate for clear and tangible global climate policies. Effective policies are essential at all levels of government to accelerate the private capital flows needed for climate resilient, nature positive, and just net transition. Therefore, it's crucial that the whole of government approach to implement policies in line with countries' nationally determined contribution, NDC, and a 1.5 Celsius scenario, recognizing common but differentiated responsibility and respective capabilities between emerging and developed economies. This will accelerate private sector action and large-scale investment. To achieve this goal, we call on governments to enact economy-wide public policies, implement sectorial strategies, especially in high-emitting sectors. Thirdly, address nature, water, and biodiversity-related challenges contributing to unstemming from the climate crisis. Fourthly, mandate climate-related disclosures across the financial system and facilitate further private investment into climate mitigation, resilience, and adaptation in emerging markets and developing economies. To help advance the climate transition, investors are also encouraged to develop and implement comprehensive investors' climate action plans and align their investment with the goal of net zero emission by 2050 or sooner, with credible interim targets, among other actions. The concept of sustainable investing was widely considered an admirable but fringe approach. Now, sustainable investing has not only become mainstream, but is recognized as a mark of prudent investment practice. Closer to home, and Malaysian participation at COP29, we align ourselves with this year COP29 theme in solidarity for a green world. Malaysia is proud to participate in the global initiative with the theme Shift for Sustainability, Climate Action Now, reflecting our determination to drive meaningful and impactful climate action. Malaysia is at the critical juncture where immediate climate action is essential to secure a sustainable future. As climate change intensifies, the nation is increasingly vulnerable to rising temperatures, extreme weather events, and biodiversity loss. Recognizing these threats, Malaysia has committed to shift towards sustainability by advancing climate action and future-proofing its environment. Throughout 2023, there were 1,023 disasters recorded in ASEAN countries, including floods, drought, earthquakes, landslides, severe storms, tornadoes, cyclones, and volcanic activity. In Malaysia, a total 170 disaster events were recorded across the country. Floods were predominant type of disaster, amounting for 98% of all events this year. This affected 200,000 citizens, or 0.6% of the country's population, who were relocated to 1,218 temporary evacuation centers. The numbers of affected individuals in 2023 increased by 4.7% compared to 2022. This worrying statistic suggests that climate and environmental factors are still exacerbating Malaysia's vulnerability to natural disaster. From the financial sector's perspective, as leaders in Malaysian investment community, we understand that addressing climate change is no longer about corporate social responsibility. Through the Institutional Investors Council Malaysia engagement with institutional investors, we see a clear shift in investment priorities. Our institutional investors are actively relocating capital as evidenced by the continued growth in sustainable and responsible investment fund and the expanding sustainable sukuk and bond market. The Government National Energy Policy 2022 to 2040 and Bank Negara value-based intermediation framework have laid crucial groundwork. Our collective efforts across the financial sector has helped develop practical implementation approaches, but we must build upon this foundation with greater urgency and scale. Yet, too many investors still approach ESG investing from a defensive posture. We consider that risk management is not enough. Investors should make decisions on the basis of risk, return, and impact in order to take full advantage of the opportunities provided by what we call the sustainability revolution. While Malaysia's share of global emission may be small, the government commitment to climate action is nothing short of bold. We are not just participants in the global fight against climate change. We are determined to be leaders in shaping sustainable, low-carbon future for generations to come. Our ambition is clear: to achieve net zero GHG emissions by 2050, in line with our nationally determined contribution, the NDC. To further solidify our commitment, we have launched and identified several critical areas that demand our immediate attention and coordinated action. The focus areas represent not just challenges to be addressed, but opportunities for transformation. Example, look, clean energy. The National Energy Transition Roadmap lay out clear targets: 70% renewable energy capacity by 2050. This will require substantial private sector participation. Phase 1 of NETR alone aims to mobilize 25.3 billion investment by 2025. The Green Investment Tax Allowance and Green Income Tax Exemption Scheme provide stepping stone, but we need to dramatically accelerate private sector's participation. Green industry innovation and just transition. The transition in sustainable practices requires systematic change. Our industry needs to be more than incremental improvement. They need transformation. However, this transformation must be equitable and inclusive. A successful transition in green economy cannot come at the cost of those currently in carbon-intensive sectors. These are livelihood, families, and communities. The opportunities for sustainable growth in Malaysia are substantial. According to the International Renewable Energy Agency, renewable energy jobs across Southeast Asia could reach 2.2 million by 2030, driven by the rising demand and cleaner energy solution. In Malaysia, government agencies and private sector's investment are focusing on solar industry and green technology, which are key drivers of job creation and economic contribution. The Malaysia Green Technology and Climate Change Corporation, MGTC, estimate that the green technology would add billions to Malaysian GDP, potentially creating thousands of jobs across industry, such as renewable energy, energy efficiency, and environmental management. These efforts are part of Malaysia's broader commitment to low carbon economy, which is expected to foster significant employment opportunities and economic growth. And let's not forget the power of collaboration and the need of a comprehensive approach for industry, workforce, economic nets, public engagement, and stakeholders. Before I end my keynote address, we must shape our economic paradigms. True sustainability requires rethinking the way we measure success. Gross domestic product, GDP, has long been the benchmark of prosperity, yet it does not account for environmental degradation or social inequity. We must redefine our success metric, incorporating ecological health and societal well-being. By promoting circular economies, sustainable finance, and responsible consumption, we create resilient in our market while safeguarding our planet. Ladies and gentlemen, we are not merely here to discuss what could be done. We are here to forge actionable strategies that can be implemented across sectors. The foundation has been laid through various national and global initiatives. Now we must forge ahead with urgency and purpose. In conclusion, the challenges we face may be daunting, but they are not insurmountable. As we embark this crucial journey at COP29, let us commit to immediate, impactful action. Let us innovate, invest, and inspire one another. Let our actions today lay the groundwork for a sustainable and resilient future, a future where all our children and their children inherit a planet that's not only surviving, but flourishing. Together, we can shift the narrative from one of despair to one of hope. Let's seize this moment for climate action, unite our effort, and future-proof our environment for generations to come. Thank you.
Many thanks, Dr. Wira, for highlighting the critical reasons for our gathering here today. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we continue with our next keynote by an educator who was the first democratically elected Minister of Education of the Kingdom of Bhutan. In tandem with his colleagues, he moved Bhutan towards fulfilling the MDGs and the country's constitutional mandate for education. His vision of holistic education, as expressed in My Green School, a concept of a green school that stands on the idea of gross national happiness. Please direct your attention to the screen to view the recorded message of CGM's International Advisory Panel member, Professor Thakur Powdyel, former Minister of Education of the Royal Government of Bhutan.
Salam Sejatra from Climate Governance Malaysia, and greetings to friends of the earth and custodians of Mother Nature. Please lend me your ears for a moment. The sea is boiling, the earth is on fire, and the sky is angry. Humanity runs helter-skelter, gasping for a reason why, till we trace the reason back to ourselves, back to you and me, back to us, the human of the species. Even as we speak, schools in Pakistan are closed to shield the children from the engulfing haze, and the air in Delhi is polluted beyond tolerance. In many parts of the world, precious water is becoming undrinkable, vital air is turning unbreathable, beloved earth is appearing unlivable, and sacred life is looking unviable. In the long saga of human evolution, we have come to a point where things fall apart and the center cannot hold. Close to a century ago, American-British poet T.S. Eliot had seen through the irony of our human lot and seen it too well for comfort. All our knowledge leads us nearer to ignorance. All our ignorance leads us nearer to death. Nearness to death, but no nearer to God. Our planet was perfect as it was, till we decided that we could edit it to fit our image. Mother Nature reigned supreme and provided for all beings, for every member of the living and the non-living, who call the earth their home. But the so-called highly evolved of all the species, the humans, proclaimed supremacy over everything and gloated over their ability to control the universe. We discovered Faustian science and designed Faustian technology to marshal Faustian knowledge. But we missed the Faustian music that animated the universal harmony underlying all phenomena, and that has made all the difference. We have no time to stand and stare here. The urgency of the moment has been aggravated by the inexorable heating of the earth that has surpassed all recorded limits. The rapidity with which snowmelt is happening is threatening sea level rises, to unprecedented levels. The drying up of water sources is leading to the parching of agricultural lands and affecting livelihoods of all species. Unseasonal rains, unseasonal floods, unseasonal drought, unprecedented forest fires, expanding deserts tell their own stories of environmental disaster. The rate at which animal and bird species are becoming extinct, the unrelenting pace of the depletion of the finite resources of our planet Earth against the insatiable greed of the humans, the relentless cycle of production and consumption, more production and yet more consumption, all point to a future that looks clearly unsustainable. Add to these the unconscionable death and destruction unleashed by human beings on other human beings through cold calculation and deliberate planning. However, lamenting over our current crisis is not an option. We have to begin where the enlightened Buddha began: right thought leading to right action. Not to go back is somewhat to advance, so said our wise elders. We have to sustain the good that we have achieved through the vision and hard work of committed men and women all around the world who care about the well-being of our ailing Mother Earth and the future of the human race. The inspiring work of climate governance in Malaysia is a case in point. But we have to go beyond. We have to restore what we have lost. We have to restore the integrity of the soil that grows our food, the purity of the air that sustains our life, the cleanliness of the water that ensures our health, and the space for the plants and animals and birds that have been rendered homeless. We have to affirm the right of the sea, the land and the sky, and establish the claim of the air, the water, flora and fauna, birds and insects, as indeed of all life forms with which we share this dear earth, our common home. What is more, we have to repair and restore the broken relationships between us, the humans, and Mother Nature, between us humans and humans, between us, the humans, and the sustaining powers above us and beyond us that keep us on our orbit. Mother Nature can do without us. So can the air and the water and the soil, the plants and animals, as indeed everything in nature. If Mother Nature turns away from us, she will lose nothing. But if we turn away from the life-giving benevolence of Mother Nature, that act will spell disaster for us. This truth about our dependence on the blessings of Mother Nature ought to make us a little humbler, a little more mindful and sensitive, acknowledging that the snapping of this vital relationship will push us to our slow but steady extinction. At a time like the present, when the done thing for individuals and institutions seems to be to get ahead of everybody else, to grab and exploit as much of the resources of the earth as possible, any call to work towards sustainability could sound like a call to make a sacrifice. Far from it. Given the finite resources of the earth and the infinite desires of the humans, the current pattern of life is simply not sustainable. But since the integrity of the economy, politics, business, industries, society, and the environment is a function of human decision, their character and content can also be altered and edified by human action. A small country like Bhutan has shown that with vision and courage, one can identify and follow its own North Star and harmonize the needs of the body with the deep yearnings of the soul. Bigger and richer nations ought to be able to do more to reduce their culpability to environmental degradation and support positive climate action. As many as 29 editions of Conference of Parties will have been completed with the Baku event underway. Heads of states and governments, environmental experts and thought leaders have crisscrossed the globe from Kyoto to Paris and beyond, deliberating on the important issues governing the health of our planet. Given the urgency of the climate crisis, the need of the hour is to move from grand declarations in boardrooms to real action on the ground. There have been enough resolutions emanating from conference after conference, but global warming is ever on the rise and climate change is an increasing threat. Obviously, therefore, future-proofing our environment would require deep soul-searching and the integrity of action at all levels, individual, institutional, national, regional, and global. And shifting for sustainability is, in essence, shifting for life and making the right moves on behalf of life of our planet. The sustainability of our planet to remain fit for humanity and the evolution of humanity to be fit for our planet must be the ultimate measure of the future-proofing of our environment and the cherished goal of climate action now. Terima kasih. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor, for your insights. Now let's hear from the Climate Governance Initiative. Please join me in welcoming Matthew Moss, Associate Director for Communications and Engagement at the Climate Governance Initiative, CGI, to share his insights.
Hello, it's a very great pleasure to be speaking with you, and I bring congratulations to Climate Governance Malaysia on this fantastic virtual programme supporting the Malaysia Pavilion at COP. I'm speaking to you from Cambridge in the UK, which is the hometown of the Climate Governance Initiative, the global network of board directors of which Climate Governance Malaysia is an important part. You've heard already from Karina Litvak, who was the first chair of the Climate Governance Initiative, CGI, but I wanted to take a few minutes now to give you a bigger picture of the network and the impact that we're having around the world. So my name is Matthew Moss. I'm Associate Director for Communications and Engagement at the Climate Governance Initiative. Our central question is this: what if every company had a climate target and a plan to meet it? Our theory of change is that it's the private sector that is responsible for the lion's share of global greenhouse gas emissions and has the most to gain from a clean carbon transition plan to net zero. That in any company, it's the board of directors that has the responsibility for owning that issue, and within the board of directors, it's the non-executive director, the independent director, who can hold their company to account, can kick the tires and ask the difficult questions about climate in the boardroom. Our role, as we see it, is to equip, to motivate those independent directors to ask those questions, to give them the courage that they need to know that they're not alone, and importantly, to give them the knowledge that enables them to understand the answers that they get and to move their companies towards climate positive action. So what is the Climate Governance Initiative? It's a global network, as I've said. We currently number 33 independent chapters in 73 countries around the world, from which you can tell that some chapters cover more than one country. We reach 100,000 members through those chapters, and the content that we provide for them is built around 8 climate governance principles. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. So as you'd expect, what we provide are events in person and online, webinars, panel discussions, podcasts, networking opportunities, and resources that we house on our Climate Governance Hub. So these can be thought leadership articles, case studies of companies that we feel are getting it right. I mentioned podcasts, which function as case studies of individual board directors, because each of them tell us about their climate journey. And within the Climate Governance Hub, you'll also find short courses, a 30-minute online course, for example, for any board director, to help them to understand their obligations and some of the vocabulary around this question. And the Climate Governance Hub functions as a library where you can go at any moment to see the resources that we put on there are free of charge and available globally. Taking a further step back, what is climate governance? It's, of course, simply the structure of rules and processes that a company puts in place to manage its responses to the risks and opportunities presented by climate change. Because it's increasingly clear that whether or not the business world takes a prominent and bold role in climate leadership is going to make the world of difference. Business decisions, business actions will either accelerate or slow climate change. It'll affect all of us, and it will affect the business that those board directors oversee. So those boards are uniquely placed to provide leadership and challenge, and to be effective stewards of their organisation for the long term. In 2019, the World Economic Forum articulated those principles that I spoke about earlier, the 8 principles of effective climate governance. You can see them on the screen. It was an urgent call to action to board directors to own this issue. The purpose of the principles is to give the board directors a structure and a framework to reassure them that they're on the right track, that they're addressing the right issues in the right way in the boardroom. It equips them with the right tools to make the best decisions that they can. The Climate Governance Initiative was formed in that same year to deliver those principles into the boardrooms of companies around the world. So we still have a very strong relationship with the World Economic Forum. Here are those chapters, those global chapters. I need to update my map because this emerging chapter is now launched. The United Arab Emirates, it became our 33rd chapter only 2 weeks ago. Climate Governance Malaysia has been a chapter of the initiative since the very first days of CGI. It's one of our oldest and most established chapters. And the chapter network together, those 33 chapters rather neatly cover 1/3 of global carbon emissions. Let me talk a little bit more about Climate Governance Malaysia because it's a great example of a high-performing chapter. As I've said, it's one of the most established and it's doing fantastic work under the leadership of Datin Seri, Sunita, Rajakumar. It functions as the Malaysian chapter of the Climate Governance Initiative, and its mission, as you can see, is to address the climate crisis as a top business risk. It's organised nearly 100 events since its launch and leverages rather brilliantly these important relationships and partnerships with institutions within Malaysia that will be known to every board director because they shape the landscape of corporate boards in Malaysia. The jewel in the crown is the National Climate Governance Summit organised by CGM. The most recent was a couple of months ago. A range of events freely available to any member of the public, very, very enlightened and very extensive program. Many of you might have participated because 3,822 people did, with a range of highly engaging speakers. That tells you, I think, across the network what a board director can expect by joining a chapter of the Climate Governance Initiative. They get access to free resources, free events like that. They get to network with our community of over 100,000 board directors around the world. They get access not only to our courses provided by CGI, but CGI also accredits professional education courses provided by individual chapters. And by joining a chapter, a board director can get access to this glorious network, which is highly influential. You can see some of the examples on the screen here. This is Chapter 0 France opening trading at the Euronext stock exchange. Chapter 0 in the UK helped to develop the Transition Plan Task Force Toolkit, which has now been adopted internationally. Here is the Malaysian National Climate Governance Summit from 2023. Again, I shall update my slides. And here is the Prime Minister of New Zealand speaking at a Chapter 0 New Zealand event. Chapter 0 in Slovenia has a board which is chaired by the President of the Republic of Slovenia. So these chapters are extremely influential within their countries. If you are a board director and would like to join your local chapter, whether that be Malaysia or elsewhere, then please feel free to do so. You can scan that QR code. It will take you directly to our list of chapters on our website. I'll leave that QR code on the screen for a moment while I invite you to follow our social media channels, which will keep you updated about all of our events and content. Thanks so much for the opportunity to speak to you. Thank you for your engagement with this topic, which is the defining challenge of our era. And thank you to Climate Governance Malaysia for inviting us to present. And finally, let's wish the delegates at COP29 in Baku every success. Thank you so much.
Hi everyone, I'm Mariani.
Thanks, Matthew. This is exactly why Climate Governance Malaysia stays committed to advancing this very important agenda. Next, we are pleased to hear a brief message from Mariani Ramli, founder of the Gibbon Conservation Society Malaysia.
Hi everyone, I'm Mariani Ramli, or BAM, and I'm the founder and president of Gibbon Conservation Society. I am excited to share the work we do at Gibbon Conservation Society, or GCS, a non-profit dedicated to the rescue, rehabilitation and release of Malaysia's forgotten singing apes, gibbons, who are often victims of the illegal wildlife trade. These beautiful primates, known for their melodious calls that echo through the rainforest, are rapidly disappearing due to habitat loss and exploitation. GCS runs two rehabilitation projects, Malaya Gibbon Rehabilitation Project, or Malaya GRAP, in West Malaysia, established in 2013, and Borneo Gibbon Rehabilitation Project, or Borneo GRAP, in East Malaysia, established in 2022. We are Malaysia's first, and to this day, the only small ape rehabilitation centers providing a safe haven for orphan captive gibbons rescued from the illegal wildlife trade, bushmeat hunting, and other unfortunate situations. Our mission is to give these primates the proper care, nutrition, and rewilding guidance to reclaim their survival skills and return to the wild, where they can once again be part of the natural ecosystem. Rehabilitation is a long, challenging process, often take 5 to 15 years, depending on the individual gibbon's trauma and history. Our gibbons come from public surrenders or are rescued and confiscated by authorities. Many arrive deeply scarred, both physically and mentally, with severe stereotypic behaviors from years of abuse by humans. Each gibbon's path to recovery is unique, and we provide personalized care and psychological treatment to help them heal, grow, and prepare for life in the wild. A great example of our work is the story of Ebony, Collie, and their baby Axel. Their upcoming release marks a huge milestone not only for us, but also for wildlife rehabilitation in Malaysia, and it really highlights the importance of our work in safeguarding this endangered species. When Collie arrived at our rehabilitation center, his future seemed bleak. Malnourished and abused as a pet, Collie couldn't swing or climb like a wild gibbon and often fell trying. And Ebony's story was just as heartbreaking. Years of neglect left her confined in a tiny basket, scarred both mentally and physically. But then something incredible happened. Slowly, with proper rehabilitation, both Ebony and Collie began to heal. Collie's weak muscles grew stronger, and soon he was swinging effortlessly. For the first time in life, he could move freely. Ebony, though still carrying the emotional scars of her past, found comfort in Collie. Against all odds, these two form a bond, and that bond became a family. In 2023, their baby Axel was born, the first gibbon ever born in Malaysian Rehabilitation Center. Axel represents everything we work for, a new beginning, a future where gibbons no longer face the horrors of captivity and exploitation. Axel's birth marks a turning point, not just for this little family, but for the entire gibbon species in Malaysia. Axel's first breath was a breath of hope, proof that rehabilitation works and these incredible primates can have a second chance at life. Gibbon Conservation Society not only focuses on the protection and rehabilitation of Malaysia's gibbons, we also place a strong emphasis on engaging and empowering local communities. We strongly believe that real lasting change happens when communities feel connected to and responsible for the wildlife around them. Our eco-edutourism programs align closely with several of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, contributing to a holistic approach to conservation that addresses social, environmental, and economic sustainability. SDG 4, Quality Education. Our educational programs and public outreach raise awareness on illegal wildlife trade and habitat protection, equipping communities and young people with essential knowledge to foster long-term conservation ethics. Additionally, we provide capacity building opportunities for local and indigenous communities and create skill roles for community members. SDG 5, Gender Equality. We are proud to have a predominantly female team leading our conservation and rehabilitation initiatives. In the conservation and scientific field, where women are often underrepresented, particularly in hands-on wildlife conservation roles, our team demonstrates that women play a crucial role in protecting biodiversity and shaping the future of environmental conservation. SDG 8, Decent Work and Economic Growth. Through our conservation-based employment and eco-edutourism program, we provide sustainable livelihood options that benefit communities while reducing reliance on activities harmful to wildlife and ecosystem. SDG 13, Climate Action. At both sites, we planted over 1,000 edible fruit trees to restore forest areas, providing sustainable food sources for both gibbons and humans. At our project sites, we serve only plant-based meals to reduce greenhouse gas emission associated with animal agriculture, while our zero plastic policy supports broader environmental goals that address climate change by encouraging sustainable practices at multiple levels. SDG 15, Life on Land. We are actively advocating for stricter wildlife protection policies. We support efforts to prevent poaching, illegal trade, and habitat destruction, directly contributing to the preservation and restoration of terrestrial ecosystem that gibbons and countless other species depends on. SDG 17, Partnership for the Goals. We collaborate with local and international organizations, government bodies, as well community leaders and members, including those from indigenous communities, to amplify the impact of our conservation work. Thank you for supporting us on this journey for the gibbons, for our communities, and for a healthier planet.
Thanks, Mariani. Ladies and gentlemen, we now invite you to share a quick feedback with us. Please scan the QR code on the screen to provide your thoughts and help us to improve future sessions. Your input is greatly appreciated. We will now take a short 45 minutes break before resuming with two distinguished panels of today. The first will be led by the CEO Action Network, followed by a session from MATA. Okay, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We are now ready to proceed with our next session, which will feature a panel discussion offering valuable insights from the private sector. This session is curated by the CEO Action Network. We look forward to an engaging exchange of ideas and perspectives with Ms. Nurul, Executive Chair of PwC Malaysia, Mr. Gurdip, Chief Executive Officer of CIMB Bank, Mr. Chong Kok Wai, Lead Secretariat and GHL Systems, Group Head, Legal Compliance and Sustainability at CEO Action Network. This session will be moderated by Datin Sri Sunita Rajakumar, Founder and Chairperson of CGM. The stage is yours, Datin. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. And it's great to be on such a fantastic panel. I know each one of you, I take great pride in all your achievements, and I'd like to think that we're as supportive as we can be. So thank you so much for participating in this panel discussion. So just a quick recap. Today is day one of our parallel COP session. The theme for today is Shift for Sustainability, Climate Action Now, Future-Proofing Our Environment. And I am delighted to have this panel with us from the CEO Action Network, a coalition of over 70 CEO leaders with a purpose to shape policies with stakeholders and create a favorable ecosystem for sustainable businesses and sustainable development in Malaysia. I'm delighted to welcome the speakers that we have today. Puan Nurul, Chairman of PwC, welcome. So great to see you. Mr. Gurdip, CEO of CIMB Bank, it's great to have you speaking with us again. Kok Wai, who has been indefatigable in running the secretariat for the CEO Action Network. Thank you so much to the three of you. I've got a set of questions that I'm going to ask each of you. But before that, I just want to remind us all that we are currently at levels of warming which are unprecedented. The 2-year running mean is already 1.5 degrees, but this part of the world has outsized responsibility as we will be the second largest region in terms of growth of energy demand. And so we're seeing this massive body of frameworks, regulations, climate litigation, where society's insistence that businesses who are destroying and polluting the environment or bad behavior must be held to account. This is really the social license to operate. And so what I would like to explore with all of you is the role that we have to play in making this more than a tick box exercise. So firstly, let's start with a personal question for each of you, me starting with Puan Nurul and then Gurdip. What are the best examples you have personally seen of business leaders leading the way in increased climate ambition and sustainability? What have you noticed?
Thanks, Sunita. In the profession, we meet, a number of clients, and I personally have a few. And I think what we have seen, maybe a couple of years, ago, is that there are many business leaders coming out and announcing their net zero goals, sharing their strategies. I think what is most impactful is, when whatever is announced, these ambitions translate into clear strategic plan. So before I share some examples of what I've seen in some of our clients, I just wanted to share a survey which was done by a UK research house. I think what they have surveyed is that leaders seem to promise the sky, ambitions are set, and probably it's because the target is a long way to go. So it's quite loosely said, yes, I will achieve that in 2030, I will achieve that in 2040. But out of the survey, a majority of them, and these are the employees and their stakeholders, saying that, it's just all talk and no action. It's just ticking the box. And to a certain extent, I think there were, comments and survey results which suggested that organizations or leaders actually only do it if it is convenient or if it is beneficial to them. Yeah. So that was the survey. So I think the message here is that, we can have all the commitments, but I think what is most impactful if it gets translated. And I think we have seen that in the Malaysian context in some of our clients. I think what I have also observed is that there is no knee-jerk reaction. I don't think that there's any clients who suddenly say that, okay, I will stop this business because it's not green and I will just migrate to something else. I think that we haven't seen, because we understand that, it has to be done in a gradual fashion. You can't just close shop and, start something new. So some example of what I have seen is the conscious effort to focus on sustainability. And this can be in many fashion. I think the most common, which I've seen in a lot of the PLC, is that there is a new division set. And this new division, it cuts across all industry. I think we have Gurdip, the banks are very regulated, so they have very stringent rules. But I think even the non-banks, many of the bigger companies, what we have seen is very focused divisions, very separate divisions. And just to share that, at the early stage, sustainability was maybe parked under risk, sustainability is maybe parked under finance. But I think more and more we are seeing new divisions set, very focused. And this involve not just looking at new product, which are green. It also involves re-looking at the processes. And I think personally to me, I have one or two clients where it's very clear that there is a team. Yeah, when we have discussions with the CEO, we can talk about the overall sort of green agenda. But I think some of the CEOs which I have personally encountered, they were very focused. I can't do everything. So these are the 2-3 things which I will focus on. Biodiversity, for example. So, there's a lot more awareness and a lot more realization that has to be translated. And we have seen that in, many of my clients, for example. So the growing of the new green business division is one. I think the other observation I have seen is there are talks about decarbonization more and more, right? Looking at processes, how it affects their existing operations. And one or two examples is revisiting processes and the supply chain. I think that is also something which I have seen. And even in most companies which we spoke to, truthfully, they know that it's important. Many don't realize how to do that, but more and more we are seeing them looking at the low-hanging fruit, something which is controllable. So very easy things like electricity, energy efficiency, use of solar. I think that's also very prevalent, from what I have seen in my clients. Two more things I know, Datin, I don't want, there's so many things, it's an interesting subject, and I think there's a lot of developments in my client, but two very key things which I think is very important and is a good sign. What we are seeing gradually is that, you set ambitions, you start taking baby steps, and, to actually achieve those, to think about how to achieve those. I think more and more we are also seeing policies. It may not have been proven, but, when you look at some of the annual report, it's very refreshing to see how they are saying that I have this KPI, I have this ambition, and it is linked to remuneration. Because that in Seri, I think money talks. So that's also a trend which we are looking at. Yeah. And lastly, I think I take you as a role model. I think the regulators have also assisted in this trend to require someone who is well versed with sustainability in their boards. I think sustainability governance is also a trend, and many of the bigger clients already have that. It's just that in discussions at the board, we know that there will be somebody, could be a lone figure, who will remind the board that, hey, you need to think about climate, you need to think about sustainability. So those are some examples which I've seen, very good developments, Datin Sri. And I'm sure Kok Wai and Gurdip, you have more war stories and war wins to share.
Thank you so much, Nurul. I couldn't agree with you more. I think a lot of people are still looking at this as a reporting and disclosure problem, but there are so many who are racing ahead, getting a competitive advantage. Of course, on that basis, I'm delighted that we have CIMB Bank with us, because they are definitely one of the leaders in this space, having invested heavily in capacity building from very, very early times, years ago, even with Cooler Earth, for example, and internal board training, internal targets, mapping out your scope 3. It's been very impressive. But Gurdip, personally, what are the business initiatives or business leaders that have inspired you?
No, thank you, Sunita. Thanks for those very kind words on us. Firstly, thank you to CGM for pulling me into this very timely catch-up. I think hopefully we have a productive COP29, although I think there's a little bit more, maybe a bit of nervousness, I think, this year compared to last year, just given where things are globally. But coming to your question, I know it's a little bit tricky when I name specific companies because we deal with so many, but the one that when I looked at the question that came to mind was a story that we had the opportunity to hear and listen, and then thereafter got a little bit closer, was really the story of Olam, right? And the CEO, Sunny, who I felt was quite inspiring. Because he kind of narrated a little bit of the wake-up call and then how he went about doing it at the company. So the wake-up call was a little bit maybe not too uncommon, but his wake-up call was his kids kind of reminding him about the urgency of the matter and the role that the company could have, right, in making a difference. And then, then realizing that, oh, wow, the sector, the agri sector is so, I would put it as significant because it's a big emitter. I think I've seen data that says, the agri sector globally emits 25% of the total global emissions. It sucks up 70% of all fresh water. So it's clearly a pretty critical sector that, one has led to maybe the state of things globally on where the climate crisis or situation is. But at the same time, then a company that was big enough to make an impact. So I thought the story was very interesting and inspiring. And really, he talked about three things, right? How he navigated stakeholders, everyone from shareholders, boards to his staff and the companies that. The people that work for the companies around the world. I thought that was interesting. Second was really innovation, the use of innovation, and really technology in different sectors are still very early days in terms of the adoption of new tech for the purposes of sustainability, right? And really making a difference in the productive efficiency of things. So everything about sensors and that leading to 20% less water consumption. All that I thought was very good because it started with a big picture problem statement and then it kind of really got translated to action that then led to, very visible metrics in terms of improvements. And all of that, I guess, connected to just better business discipline, right? Because it's a win-win, right? You're doing it for various reasons, but in the end, it did translate to a very sound business. So I thought that was particularly a stand-up for me. Of course, there's a lot of good stories at Unilever, which I've heard also. So these two maybe global companies that I would relate to, me personally kind of enjoying the story of their journey and it was inspiring. I think closer to home, of course, we've, in many things that the bank does, we do things like sustainability-linked loans, So we launched a big facility where we link the facility to certain sustainability targets, and then that gets that impacts the actual pricing that the client pays. So we've had interesting story with energy companies in Sarawak, for example, being the first energy company in Malaysia to sign up for SLL, and obviously first company in Sarawak for that matter. So I thought that was quite forward-looking. Then, plantation, for example, one of the very big plantation companies in KL, Malaysia-based, clearly, taking the lead in doing, setting their targets based on science-based measures, which I thought was also very, very good, because a lot of these things you want to do it with a lot of credibility, right? And so the minute you set those targets and you really base it on science-based targets and all of that, it adds that much of credibility, and so you're off to a good start. So maybe these are a couple of things that stand out, maybe from a sort of personal reflection, Sunita.
I love that. And I think, of course, in your job, your day job, you must come across so many business leaders who are also asking you to help them with solutions, with financing the solution, isn't it? So that must be inspiring as well, that they're taking this seriously and they want to see the way forward, right? Kok Wai, you are in charge of shepherding over 70 CEOs, all of whom have put their hand up for increased climate ambition. Whether in this country or outside, is there any particular personality that has inspired?
Thank you, Datin. Firstly, I'm so glad to be in this panel, being the lead secretary for CEO Action Network. Thank you for having me. I've been listening to Nurul and Gurdip, but none of them actually say that one of the pivotal roles is to join the CEO Action Network as one of the main achievements. But yeah, let me start off by saying that one of the pivotal moments for us in GHL is joining CEO Action Network, and it is something that gives us the leap by having the like-minded people in looking in all sorts of examples and success stories. One of which that really captured me was a circular business model that was being transformed into what we call the accelerate business transformation into the business model. I wouldn't want to say the particular company, because after that people think that it is a promotion to them. But I guess people would know. They deal a lot with ocean-bound plastics, and something that you can see that by collecting plastics from the sea and subsequently making them into product, turning them into profits, making lots of strides in the international arena, and that was something that I feel that it is so much inspiring to me, and I believe that is one of the main things. Many people has not used the circularity model in their business, and it's something that I would hope that we will see more, and definitely more towards those companies that is doing more on food to waste projects, waste management, and there are also companies who are in the Green List Partnership Program, and for us, digital transformation, reduction of paper, and so on and so forth. So these are the things that really inspire me, some of the examples.
Okay, thank you so much, Kok Wai. Thank you. I think the CEO Action Network has been inspirational, and I say that. Between the CEO Action Network with over 70 CEOs standing up for climate action and, of course, Climate Governance Malaysia, I call this the largest mobilization of the private sector, and it is for increased climate ambition and increased sustainability ambition. So I think that's just so impressive. And this has gone noticed in the region, around the world. People are noticing that things are coming out of Malaysia. But anyway, let's go around to our second set of questions, which is we've looked at business leaders overseas or locally who have inspired you, whom you think are leading the way. What are personally inspiring stories that you have seen within your organization, which has led to increased climate ambition and sustainability? I'm trying to keep it personal here because really it's the personal stories that will motivate people. Yeah, for Nurul.
Okay, so in terms of PwC purpose, I think the purpose, just to share with everyone that it is to build trust in society and solve important problems. So on a personal, when I say personal basis, within the context of PwC, I think there had already been a realization actually 20 years ago that, climate change, is a risk, is a focus area, is going to be a big problem. And I think we have started talking about that, even 20 years ago. I just need to give a shout out to, I think, a person who all of us know, Andrew, who leads the sustainability, unit, that it has been an uphill battle for him. And, for me as a practitioner, you can actually feel it. Maybe before 6 years ago, I think, it was a lone person championing the cause. But I think more and more, there has been a lot more awareness and realization that, it is a growing risk. And I also wanted to shout out within PwC, I think we are all, businessmen here. I think profits, will always be a key factor in running a business. But there is a small unit in PwC, maybe 2-3 people who have been talking about, climate change, talking about sustainability from day one, and they are getting more and more visible. So really a shout out to that advocate group. So within the firm, I think what we have seen is that, there is more and more awareness. The push by those few people who have resisted and persisted over these years, I think it has come to fruition. I think as a firm, we are now committed to achieving net zero. And as I mentioned just now, I think it's quite easy to make a commitment, but I think what we are doing now is to put in place actions, to kickstart this journey. We talk about, the energy audit. We talk about relooking our aircons. We talk about energy consumption. I think one of, was also very inspiring was, I think this small group, they continued to push the boundary. It's not very easy to deal, like why, right? 70 CEOs is not easy to deal with. So can you just imagine having to convince 100 partners, I think 100 owners of the business, to change how we are doing, doing things. I think one particular good example was relooking the business travel policy, right? As leaders, you expect that, any travels you take business class. I think what we have now changed is that anything less than 4 hours, 5 hours is all economy, regardless of where you go. Yeah. So you can just imagine the pushback, but that has been pushed through. I think another good example, where we talk about business leaders, me also in particular, is, the need always to print. I think all our printers are gone. And you can also imagine the rage when, the message is that no more printing. Yeah. So these are small things which, is happening within the firm. I think the other story I sort of just need to share is that, we started with that small group of advocates. We started with Andrew, who keeps talking about sustainability and being green for the last 15 years. People are listening now. Yeah. So he is having the last laugh. But what I think is, I feel is also very important, and it affects me personally, is that, as leaders, we embrace, sometimes with a lot of pushback, but I think we eventually realize and we embrace it. But the realization is that it is not just the leaders, it is not just that 3 person who works on this subject matter, but how PwC has done it is to make sure that all our employees are also our ambassadors, right? I think there are a number of employee engagement and gamification. Our employees, 90%, more than 90% are aged less than 30, right? And what excites them are not just saying, oh, you must be green, you must do this, but I think in forms of gamification to get their buy-in. Yeah. So these are, a few things which I felt, assisted in the cause. And, within this organization, it has actually led to me feeling that, yes, there is an ambition, and, likely we will be able to get there because of, all the advocates which we have.
Thank you so much. And I know we can always rely on PwC. You know, anytime we've needed help, you know, we've been able to put our hand up and someone always comes through. And of course, Andrew, as you said, was a pioneer.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, so I forgot. Kok Wai was very unhappy because we didn't mention CEO Action Network. I think one of the point when I took on the chairmanship role, I think one of the highlight was, when I realized that PwC is taking a very big part in the CEO Action Network. That's why I volunteered for the Steerco Kok Wai.
Oh, well done, well done.
Participating in the CEO Action Network is also something which I'm personally proud of, and I'm very happy that PwC plays an active part in it. Active is very important, Kok Wai, right?
Thank you. And coming back to that, because CIMB was the founder, if not one of the co-founders of CEO Action Network. And Gurdip, I'm sure you must be having a lot of difficulty because there's so many inspiring stories from within the organization. So what would you like to share with us today?
Yeah, no, so I think, the starting point has to be Luann, right? I think many of y'all know Luann. Luann certainly was someone that I worked with in her prior role before she became our head of sustainability and then now the chief sustainability officer. So this goes back to 2018 when we were both in the strategy team at CIMB and doing all the strat stuff, which includes kind of anticipating what are some of the future catalysts, future priorities and areas that we need to invest in, we need to think about. And so I remember the early days of being exposed to the whole sustainability, if you like, problem statement, right? And so I think Luann has kind of started the team with basically the first employee of the sustainability team to who we are today across the region, where we have close to about 50 now across the whole group, core sustainability team members. And then, of course, we also have people in the different business units. Kok Wai, if you don't mind, maybe you can go on mute. I think every time you come off mute, there's a bit of background. Yeah, thanks. And so I think Luann has been instrumental, and not to mention just internally, but externally as well. As you mentioned, Ken, she was part of the startup team that pulled this whole together when we were kicking off our Cooler Earth series. And the first year, we all came together with a few of the other corporates and formed this. So I think it's safe to say that, like Andrew is to PwC, Luann definitely is the face of sustainability in CIMB and maybe increasingly in the broader sort of corporate world, in Malaysia and I'm sure eventually in the region. So kudos to her, and we're very fortunate that, she, and to be honest, if I reflect back on, who I knew her to be and, which is this hard-hitting strat PMO person who was, cracking the whip on everyone in the bank to, get productivity projects going and get this and that going, to then, at that time, if you ask me, will she be, Chief Sustainability Officer of CIMB, I wouldn't have guessed it, So until the time we started talking about it, I didn't know she had this innate passion in this area. So I think that was very good. A couple of others, so one of the things that we recognized that we needed to evolve when sustainability started, it was obviously a fairly new subject matter internally, right? And the bankers obviously had a very big range of understanding of sustainability. Some knew it quite well, some knew it very little. And so one of the things we said is for this to be mainstreamed in the bank, we will also need to broaden how we set up, right? We cannot just rely on the central sustainability team, which is where I mentioned just now, Luann and team are part of. So we needed to start having sustainability specialists or key focal points in the various businesses, whether it's wholesale, retail, consumer, commercial, etc. And so the second group of people that I definitely have a lot of regard and appreciation for are these, because they are really individuals. It's not like they have the big sort of infra for them. Like, the central sustainability team has morphed into a big team, but these individual sustainability heads in the business, they are really one-man show, sometimes two at most. And so they are carrying a lot on their shoulders, right? So the folks who are doing that at the retail bank, the folks that are doing it at the commercial bank, the wholesale bank, definitely have played a very strong role in knocking on the door of the day-to-day bankers and ensuring that they are prioritizing these things and they are embracing the initiatives and internalizing the various sustainability efforts. That would be the second. And the third is, if I were to just think of one of the countries that, part of it, of course, they had a bit of tailwind, but I think our Singapore team, for fairly small operations, but increasingly big for the group now, they are over 10% contribution to the whole group. They're the first operations to be net zero. Partly because the timing was good, that they had an opportunity to relook at their entire space. So they moved into a much more energy efficient space. So given the starting point that they were, plus more optimized space, so they became net zero. And in fact, this year, in terms of one of our headline targets, Sunita, if you know, is our 100 billion sustainable finance mobilization, right? So we track that by countries and all of that. And this year, Singapore has been the outperformer, right? So we've had a very strong run in Singapore with obviously good demand from clients as well. Of course, in relative size, the Malaysia one is a lot bigger, but just in terms of annual performance. So yeah, I think these three groups would be people that I would say, internally, I would maybe call out at this juncture.
That's brilliant. So glad to hear that. And Gurdip, you and Nurul have really been quite coy, but really, I feel a lot of it is also due to the presence and the space that the both of you create within the organization, so that any of your staff, your key actors are willing to step up and be more sustainable because they know that you're providing this safe space, that you're going to champion them, that you're going to recognize the efforts, and you're going to give them a shout out in forums such as this. And I'm sure that plays a huge role as well. So thank you, Gurdip and Nurul, for being these sort of leaders. Really, really much appreciated. And Kok Wai, what do you have to share with us today?
I'm so glad to hear Andrews and Luann. Really, short of saying that they are the pivotal people that we know. When I first joined CEO Action Network until where I took on as at least secretary, and not to forget Kish, as we all know, the Kish. So seriously, we look at it in such a way that when you talk about inspiring stories, what inspired ourselves to do sustainability? It's either someone role model, and after that, what do you bring into your organization that is more important? How do you actually embed the so-called sustainability function into each and every department, and not just the sustainability department? And for your information, I'm not just hating sustainability here. I also do legal and compliance, and also lead the secretariat for CEO Action. And when people ask you, how do you do that? And it is purely based on passion. It is that you want to make a difference. And you show people by your actions. And by actions means that when I first grabbed hold of this position, we put on a solar panel. We are adamant, the board is adamant, my group CEO is adamant that we will transit from using grid to renewable energy. And after that, we, as a payment company, we reduce the usage of paper by putting in digital receipts, which is already in place. It's some of the key initiatives that the company has done. And of course, most importantly, not to, once again, as we step up to take on the role as the lead secretariat for CEO Action Network, which I think we all should lead and learn at the same time. These are some of the things that I'm trying to share, and most of the time I try to encourage more people to join the leadership role in CAN. And I'm sure Datin, you would agree with me that it's not easy to find even a co-lead to help out in some of the initiatives that we want to roll out. and we have more things that we can do, in terms of sustainability. As you have seen, for the past 13 months, the heat has gone to a all-time high, and I'm sure we're going to reach another high as we go on. So more actions, and that is the reason why it is a CEO Action Network, and really a call to action for all the leaders, especially the CEO.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Kok Wai. I couldn't agree with you more. As you know, I spend almost all my waking hours on this subject. And I want to now go into a question which is a little bit tougher. I think we're transforming from shareholder primacy to a stakeholder economy. The reshaping of this economy is going to generate tremendous value. And against this backdrop, we know, as Kok Wai mentioned, we were seeing extreme weather events already. And within a few days of such events, for example, in South Brazil, within a few days, 3 days, people are on the street rioting with guns. So we live in societies which have a very thin veneer of sophistication. And we know that when you have these 1 in 200-year events happening more frequently with more intensity, this is going to be a problem. And yet, there are many challenges that we are currently seeing, which is leading to a dilution of ambition. What are your views on what is happening, what you're observing, and maybe sometimes with your clients or your customers or your stakeholders that you're dealing with? Do you see this as a pullback? Is it a temporary, permanent pullback? Or do you see this just as a pause, which some people refer to what's happening in the EU? They're pausing and they're restocking their priorities to ensure that they retain a competitive advantage as well. Nurul, what are you seeing?
I think I won't say fresh from the oven, but the recent development in the US, I think, people are concerned about, what is going to happen when the biggest economy is expected to retreat. I think there were talks about, coming out from the Paris Agreement, and we all know what his stance are. And, there is that, I think green hushing is a relatively new word where I think many in the US especially are very worried about using the word ESG because it would anger, the incoming government. But I think what is, what at least is reassuring for me. And, I was reading some of the recent survey right after the win. I think what people are saying, what their concerns are, maybe if I can just read a couple of, survey comments. I think there were comments which were very fiery, right? Fight like hell, there is no time to retreat, go more aggressively. I think the one point was, regardless of what happens in the government, companies doing business in and with the EU must comply with those regulations, which means that the torch will continue to grow. So this is precisely the observation from what I see locally. Yeah. Different territories, they would have different level of maturity, the reasons can be very different for each country. But in terms of observation in Malaysia, I think we are, I don't think that we are going to backtrack. And I think this is helped with many of our advocate group. I think even our government is committed to the cause. And like what many of the business leaders, even overseas, are saying, Trump or the incoming government may have their different views, but for business leaders, as long as we know what is good for the business, yeah, and we all know what is good, what is the mega trend which is driving these developments, this decision making, and I think what is the rising expectation of our stakeholders, which are the younger lot. I think we will all do the right thing. So your question about whether it is a pullback or it is a pause, I think in my view, in my world now, I think there is no pause. What is the gap, right? Is what we see is the implementation gap, right? Because we all make commitments, and as an auditor, anything which is not measured is not there. Yeah. So in terms of implementation, when we even talk about the PLCs, I think there are some statistics. I think this will come out soon in our survey, but less than 10% of our top Malaysian 50 PLCs are verified. So it's quite easy to make commitments, but if it's not audited or assured or verified, that level of credibility sort of reduces in the eyes of the auditor. I'm not sure about the others. And I think what is very important in terms of addressing this implementation gap, I think in this time, it's data, right? Anything which, we need to get as much data so that it can be measured, and it will add credibility when you go out to your stakeholders. I think the other I think the other point in terms of implementation gap also is the stakeholder engagement. I think with the data, how do you manage your stakeholders? Because as a company, I think we have various stakeholders which we need to manage with. And I think maybe one other point which I thought is very key in terms of talking about ambition, and what we realize is that you may have an ambition, but in this complicated subject, don't even think about perfection. I think progress is I think we need to prioritize progress over perfection, because we will be learning along the journey. Anything can happen along the our commitment period. Yeah, so those are my views. Not a pause, not a pullback, but I think there are still challenges which we need to deal with so that we can run faster in this journey.
I think those are excellent observations, Nurul. I couldn't agree with you. I mean, of course, in my world, I'm seeing tremendous progress. But I think some people are also looking externally at the signals they are getting, especially the larger oil and gas companies, governments, backpedaling, and they're wondering, can we do it alone? Especially if Malaysia has historically contributed only 0.4% to cumulative emissions. We might be a 1 in 17 countries of mega biodiversity, but how much can we do? And especially as a net exporting country, where our customers might not be willing to pay for the cost of ecosystem services, for example. So that's something where we still need to keep engaging with stakeholders, not just domestically, externally, if we want to retain a competitive advantage, isn't it? But Gurdip, you are very customer facing. So how do you juggle what your customers are saying and what Luann is saying internally, for example, and of course, what your priorities are? Over to you, Gurdip.
Thanks. No, so I think let's start maybe with a bit of my 2 cents on the whole global scene, and then we can come to the Malaysia, the regional perspective. So I think globally, I mean, there's many ways to think about this, right? But let's accept that, there is a lot of momentum happening or has happened in recent years, right? So this is a long race, or to some people, it needs to be a lot shorter and faster. But in reality, the world has set a 2050 game, right? Or a 2050 game plan, which is essentially we are running a marathon. And, to say that we are completely off track, of course, there's a lot of data to tell you that we need to do a lot more, etc. But let's talk about a little bit of the positives first, right? I mean, the positives are that, look, even if you track in 2023, the amount of renewable energy that has come on stream globally, it is 50% more than the year before. And that's massive, right? You think about a year-on-year change, right? Of course, to the naysayers, they will say that's not good enough, right? We need to triple, not 50%. But it's fine, right? I think, I'll get worried if things start to really plateau, right? But if you talk about 50% growth versus you ideally wanted 70, yeah, it's not great, but it's not what I call a worrying outcome. If you look at the investor community, and one of the things that when we started this journey, we looked at all our stakeholders, right? From customers, regulators, investors, society, and our staff. These 5 our main stakeholders. And, you know, if you look at the investor community, and I was looking at some data on this whole signatories to the UN PRI, right? Principles of Responsible Investing, you know, that has continued to grow. So we are now at, I think, 5,000 signatories, and even in the last 12 months, that has grown quite nicely. Although there were a few high-profile, you know, you could argue kind of pausing, if you like, as opposed to a reversing, a pausing. But nevertheless, there is still a lot that are joining the bandwagon, right? And I think, you know, so you want to take a glass half full or half empty argument. I definitely take a half full argument. So I think, you know, I think we are still progressing, albeit maybe a little bit choppy from time to time. Of course, coming out of COVID, coming out of, you know, some of these conflicts that we've been having in Europe, of course, then you get, you know, coming to the fray, this whole debate between livelihoods and what is more important, between that and energy security. So then, of course, those that are motivated to slow down the momentum will take the opportunity to narrate that, right? And so we have that, right? And that's the reality. I mean, you know, to say that the whole world 100% are on the same alignment all the time is never going to happen, right? But I think there's enough momentum to tell me that we are not at a major risk of reversal. We may be in choppy waters a little bit from time to time, but if you think of the journey to 2050, you know, I think it's still in reasonably good shape. I think if you then think of, you know, a few kind of hotspots to worry about or to think about. So if you come back to Malaysia and the region, I think if I look at Malaysia, you know, in the last couple of years, again, momentum has been credible. Of course, some people will say, hey, you know, why carbon taxes only for 2 sectors? Why can't we do it more holistically for everyone? But I think it's a sensible sequence that is being taken, right? And if you think of like what some of the regulation is doing, like Bank Negara has come out and said by 2026, they expect, you know, more than half of all new loans given to the non-retail sector to be green or transitioning. I mean, that's a big step, and I can tell you the banks are all scrambling to work on this, right? So the triggers and the catalysts are coming from various fronts. Okay, so I think again, you know, I'm less worried of any major reversal, but of course, you know, it could be faster, and we got to just, you know, deal with that from time to time. So then it really comes down to, you know, what are the carrots and the sticks that will accelerate or slow down things, right? And that's what we always watch for. So I think the momentum is there, but whether it goes faster or slower, then it comes to these different things that, you know, can help, right? And so, you know, Nurul talked a little bit about the US situation. I think that's likely going to be something that we need to watch. So if you think of the EU CBAM that we have, you know, there was some talk and hope that the US equivalent to CBAM would come in. I think with this incoming administration, maybe that's not going to be a high priority agenda. That will probably, you know, get delayed or on a worse outcome, you know, if US leaves the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, right, then that could be a real bad thing, because any re-entry will likely be very difficult, because it requires, I think, 2/3 of their Congress or Senate. So these are some biggies to watch, right? Like, is the US situation a temporary situation for 4 or 5 years? Or are there some causes of action that are taken in the next couple of years that make it so difficult for them to get mainstreamed back, you know, after 5 years, right? So I think that is something we have to watch, and that could materially slow down the momentum, I feel. And we gotta just watch that lah. But yeah, overall, I think, you know, as to be expected, there will be some speed bumps that we got to deal with, and but overall, I think momentum is still decent.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. You know, The Economist on the 30th of June came up with a really powerful article where they were analyzing just solar in the world. In 2004, it took us a year to have 1 gigawatt of solar installations. This year, we're expecting 2 gigawatts every day. Every single day, 2 gigawatts of solar installations, which is just incredible. I mean, this is the pace of change. So I think you're right. You might see some holding back, some nerves, some regions looking for competitive advantages, but the pace of change is on track. What do you think, Kok Wai? What are your views on this?
As a whole, I mean, based on my dealings with the relevant corporates, I think there is what I call a reporting fatigue, perhaps. As I listen to what Nurul has just shared on data. Of course, what gets measurable gets to be disclosed, and you do not want to disclose something that is a mistake that you make and maybe be called for greenwashing. And there are a lot of people that are watching, association and so forth. And then you have the geopolitical situation that what has Gurdip just mentioned. But all said, I believe that the reporting fatigue is one thing that is very true among the corporates in Malaysia. That is why that they're not pausing, but they're slowing down to the extent that they just do enough to probably, meet the standards that is being set by the regulators. So right now we have a national reporting sustainability framework based on ISSB. I believe a lot of people will be scrambling, and Nurul will be able to share on that. And there are more people who will come forward and say that, hey, can you organize more talk on this so that we know what is expected of the regulator, that we won't run foul. I'm not sure whether there is, we need to do another round of gap analysis and all that. And I agree, whether it's a carrot or stick, sometimes I'm confused as well. But as I deal with as a whole, we know very well that ESG has to start with the governance. So we cannot just start with just one sector itself or just one so-called portion of it, like the listed coal, for example. And we know the SME is made up of 97% of our economy, and if they are not in the pack, you are not going to do a good reporting for your ISSB when it comes to your scope 3. So my question is, of course, always, what are we going to do about the SMEs? I know that the banks are helping them in providing the kind of tools and so on and so forth that SMEs that CIMB has put in and so forth. But to what extent are they using the tools, and after that, what's next? Who are going to hold their hands? And it comes down to perhaps incentives from the government and more engagement, awareness program. And I've seen so many, as you open up the LinkedIn, you see on a daily basis there are plenty of talks given to the SMEs, but are they really getting in the information, or is it an information overload? Like I said, back to the word fatigue that has stopped everybody down. And the worst thing is that, based on the Paris Agreement, which we are a signatory, the report card is up for us to show, within the next 5 years, what are we going to do? Because 2030 is nearby, it's not 2050. So all these things actually cause a lot of, not confusion, but rather sort of like a fatigue to the scene, especially to the corporates.
Yeah, I hear you, Kok Wai. I think there's a thinking that this massive momentum on reporting and disclosure is actually not a momentum on ambition. It's just asking for you to disclose where you're at so that allocators of capital, like investors and bankers, can then decide if you're going to be part of the problem or still part of the solution. Right? So the disclosure is a double-edged sword. It might appear to be a stick rather than a carrot, but for those who really understand the importance of it, it really is a carrot because it shows very clearly your competitive advantage. And, when I'm speaking now, what I tend to say is that, everybody who needed to get the mitigation memo has received the mitigation memo. And if they don't understand it, well, what are you going to do? Because even a child or a teenager understands the basics behind the climate science, you know. But there are many, many business leaders, including the three of you, who are seeing this as a massive competitive advantage. And they're trying to be part of the conversation, part of the solution, and so on and so forth. Yeah, that's what I think anyway. So the last round of questions, it's been such a pleasure engaging with the three of you, is, you know, we're facing all of these issues, and I think we're looking for a decision useful disclosure that's going to help drive capital to the right place, but yet a lot of reporting entities are trying to use their TCFD or their ISSB reports and making it into transition plans without changing anything. They're facing a danger of greenwashing. Are we truly comfortable with the significant assumptions that are being made? Are we relying on technologies which are currently not mature for a 2050 target? Are we relying on offsetting too much, where some of the thinking is that shadow pricing might be considered as diligence, for example, because then the boardroom can very clearly see which parts of the businesses are going to be vulnerable to the transition, where it's inevitable that a negative externality like carbon will be priced. So when we see this, and you know, organizations like CAN, we try to agitate with policymakers. So when you are speaking to policymakers and regulators, what would you recommend to them? How can they support business leaders who really want to break through and lead the way on climate ambition, not just in the country, maybe not even in the region, but can we provide global thought leadership? What would your thoughts be on this?
I think if we talk about policymakers and regulators, definitely their support to the business leaders is very crucial. So as we can move on from ambition to action. Yeah, so that is the keyword, ambition to action. To a certain extent, we have seen that in Malaysia. I think just, you know, you talk about the bigger companies having the resources, and you know what happens to, you know, the smaller ones where they may not be very exposed. I think that's a question, yeah, whenever we speak to, you know, either the ministry or the regulators, that's something also in their mind. How do we help the smaller companies? You know, so you know, if there was only one objective in life, and that is climate change with no other considerations, I'm sure everyone would straight away do something to make sure that you know, we do all the right things. But unfortunately, there are many other considerations like profit, cost, supply chain, and I think that is where policies and regulation play a part to make sure that there is a minimum response level, so that, you know, it will act as a start to a tide for everyone. Yeah, so we need some intervention, and I think regulation is a first step to nudge the action. And in Malaysia, for example, I think what we have seen um, very clearly, you know, all the various regulators playing a role. So for example, we are involved with Bursa in terms of having their data availability and centralization of information. So there is decentralized sustainability intelligence solution, which actually facilitate compilation of information of companies regardless of size. Yeah, so we talk about smaller companies getting funding so that they can start their net zero journey. So this is one way where I think Bursa is collecting the data so as it's very transparent. You know, investments can come in, or you know, they can actually give guidance in terms of how to streamline sustainability reporting. Yeah, it also enables the provision of green financing access to, you know, the smaller companies with this platform. um, I think one also very recent development, which you know, it's not just because the chairman is a former colleague, but I think the SC is also taking a very active role in terms of advocating for this agenda. I'm sure you have heard about the National Sustainability Reporting Framework, and I think when it was launched, I felt that it was very appropriate because, you know, you start in a staggered manner because you understand that, you know, some of the smaller companies may not have the resource or, you know, both in terms of people or money to actually, you know, implement the disclosure regime. Yeah. So you know, in terms of adoption of the framework itself, I think the SC has also not just said, okay, this is the rule and you just do it. I think what was very refreshing was the
Nurul, I can't hear you. I can't hear you. Your audio has just gone off. Okay. In the meantime, while Nurul's sorting out her audio, Gurdip, if I could just pass it across to you for a moment.
Yeah, I hope you can hear me. All good?
Yes, I can. All good.
Okay.
Okay.
So yeah, I think this is a slightly tougher one, and you know, so I'm trying to think of, you know, so first is needing to connect some of the dots better, right? And what I mean by that is, so we talk about the opportunity and the problem statements, and then, you know, we put a series of initiatives and frameworks and programs. So I don't have a specific example on this yet, but I'll get to that in a minute. But one is just a general suggestion or thought that when we think of, you know, let's say CBAM as a problem statement, right? Or it can also be an opportunity statement. And who in that, you know, spectrum of corporates who are the highest potential impacted parties, right? Just maybe by percentage of reliance on exports to Europe, etc. And how can then, you know, a combination of policy, the carrot and the stick come in to really catalyze some of these larger companies who are very reliant on exports to Europe, who will be impacted by CBAM, to really make the right investments to kind of, you know, transition or transform themselves, right? So I think, you know, whether we talk about broad general policies or targeted, and I sense with the recent budget that that's probably a bit of the plan with steel, aluminium, etc. But, you know, maybe we need to connect a little bit beyond that to add a few dimensions to say not just the carbon tax for these two sectors, but what is the carrot angle to them? Yeah. To really take this as a catalyst to transition themselves and really be a leader in the region, at least, if not beyond the region, right? So I think, and you know, we sit in the JC3, which is together with Bank Negara SC, and so a lot of ideas come there. And so I think there is just a general push towards better coordination between the different parties that are dealing these carrot and stick cards, if you like, and to really converge, you know, and maybe tackle it sector by sector or theme by theme, and really see whether we can, you know, do something different. And related to that, you know, I was then thinking, like, you know, in Malaysia, we're quite good over the years of giving all sorts of incentives, right? So if you think of back then, you know, we had the multimedia super corridor, right? The whole push on technology and digital back in the day. And so there was this 10-year tax credits, I mean, tax-free status, etc. So, I mean, if we think of, again, the same train of thought on sectors, so, you know, like we in CIMB, we've done this sector targets for 6 sectors, right? So we've got 2030 targets for 6 sectors so far, which is the higher emitting sector. So if you just take one sector, take cement, which is quite a concentrated industry, right? Not that many players, they're all very big players. And, you know, if, let's say it's a priority for the country, I'm not so sure, because in the whole stacking of things, it may not be a huge priority. But if it was, why can't we say that, okay, you know, this is the pathway to net zero for the country. This sector, like CIMB, we've set a target to say it needs to be 36% lower emission intensity come 2030, right, from our baseline year. So if we aggregate that as a national target, and we say this sector we should reduce by 36%, okay? I mean, of course, they can come up with a different number based on different methodology, and then why don't we incentivize the sector and say, if you are on track for this emission reduction pathway, or come 2030, you know, you will get, I don't know, 2 years of lower corporate tax or something like that, you know, something a little bit different. And I think these things could be a little bit of an additional catalyst that some people, you know, will take advantage, because I think the government has in the past given various incentives. So we need to think of a bit more of the carrot angle and, you know, pick a sector that we really are, you know, reliant on, or is a big sector. It could be also palm, for example, and, you know, do something like that, right? So I think those are maybe some thoughts around how we could do something different lah. Yeah.
Good points, good points. So your thinking is approach it on a sectoral basis and throw more incentives rather than just be punitive about this, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because the punitive, sorry, I was just going to say the punitive angle, Sunita, is there already, because if these guys don't transition and
your trading partners,
they are exporting to Europe, they're gonna get hit, and eventually carbon tax will come and it will also hit them. So the punitive angle is there. We need to combine it with a bit of carrot, and then that may get people over the tipping point, you know.
Yeah. Sorry, just to explore this. So how is this going to disincentivize early movers? Because then everyone's saying, I'm going to wait until the incentive comes, and I'm going to be penalized for moving too quickly because the incentive hasn't come yet.
No, because I assume, okay, then we can decide what is the right milestone timing. It doesn't have to be 2030.
Understand.
You can do a 2027 checkpoint or
right.
That will then, and the idea is the earlier you get, then there will be a snowball. I mean, the earlier you invest, there's a snowball effect. So come 2030,
more incentive.
You have a higher chance of outperforming the target. Right?
Okay, very good, excellent. Kok Wai, I'm going to ask you the next question and then we'll wrap up with Nurul. Okay, all right, over to Kok.
Well, again, Gurdip has said it, is the incentives that we are all looking at from the beginning. In fact, you know, Busa call upon us every year, we try to formulate what are the costs that we need to do in terms of making a smooth climate transition every year in our company, and that's something that I believe that something that the policy makers and the regulators, not the regulators, more aptly the government should actually give more incentives, not just the tax and so on and so forth. I'm not sure how this could be, but again, I want to stress that the incentive is not just towards the listed coal, but also to get the SMEs on the wagon band, so that when when the listed companies engage with the stakeholders, most of the time you go down the value chain, these are the SMEs that you're dealing with. So they will always come back to you is that if I report on this, who is going to pay the cost for it? So that's actually very practical stuff that we are dealing with. So if nobody is going to pay for it, they're not going to do it. So they're going to ask you to do it for them. But that would increase more costs. It's always the situation that the big companies are facing, you know, to the extent that you don't want them to start saying that, oh, if it's only listed coal that is supposed to do it, why not I just delist it? You do not want that to happen. You want the economy to flow, and you need that extra bit from the government and the policymakers.
Thank you so much, Kok Wai. Nurul, 1 minute just to. I'm so sorry you got interrupted just now, but it's great to have you back. What do you think?
No, I agree with what Gurdip and Kok Wai mentioned. I think maybe one last point. I think I just wanted to say that our regulators and government, I think it's in the right direction. We talk about embracing the disclosure and reporting requirements. I can totally understand why it's done on a phase basis. Bigger ones with more resources, and eventually there may be standards which are a lot more simplified for some of the smaller companies. But at the end of the day, the market will work its way, right? If you do not want to embrace it, you may lose out in terms of investors coming in, or trades with in terms of your export trade. Yeah. And I think the last point, which I think we are also involved, and I feel very strongly about data, because there are always that risk about claiming that I'm the best, the greenwashing claims which Kok Wai talked about. So I think even now the regulators realize that, and in preparation for the future where I think almost everything will need to be verified, I think we are also taking the initiative to share the knowledge with some of the smaller companies or smaller firms, so as they know how to assure, they know how to measure, and they know how to give assurance to their clients. Yeah. So it's it's not just the regulator doing their own thing, the businesses doing their own thing. I think it's a whole ecosystem to make sure that your scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, and the ambitions can be met in 2030 or 2040. We may not be around, but I think we need to make sure that we have the foundation to make sure that that happens.
It's been great being on a panel with you guys. Thank you so much for your time. I loved what Nurul said, that progress beats perception. Progress beats perfection. That's something that I'm going to be using. And I love that you want to ensure minimum response levels. That's in phasing out. I love that Gurdip reminded us that this is a long journey, a marathon, and we've already made considerable progress, but can we try to connect the dots better between problem statements, which are also opportunities? And of course, Kok Wai kept reminding us who's helping the SMEs, and this has to flow down from the larger companies through Scope 3 reporting as well, right? Thank you so much, all of you. Really, really appreciate your time today. See you again soon. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks all for your excellent insights. Now, without further ado, let's welcome our next and final panel for the day, curated by the Malaysian Association of Tour and Travel Agents, MATA. We are delighted to introduce our esteemed panelist, Mr. Frank, Director of the Dutch Association of Travel Agents and Tour Operators, and member of the European Travel Agents and Tour Operators Association, Ms. Rahima, Head of Group Sustainability at Malaysia Aviation Group, and Dr. Jitesh, Head of Research at Taylor's University and Hub Leader of the Sustainable Tourism Impact Lab. This session will be kindly moderated by Mr. Nigel Wong, President of MATA. Please join me in welcoming them. Thank you.
Hey, very good morning, everybody. Just trailing off from the last session, which was extremely interesting. I hope in the future that we'll be able to engage some of our esteemed panelists one-on-one. So Datin, we're hoping that you're going to make that connection for us. Once again, thank you to CGM for this opportunity to just express some of our views in tourism relating to climate change. So probably what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set a little bit of the context of where our discussion is going to go today. And each of the panelists here has been kind enough to present a short presentation, a set of slides, and look at key areas of which they're going to be sharing about in terms of how tourism is one of the key stakeholders in this whole climate change conversation. So before I start, I just want to say that over here in the ASEAN region, there has been a lot of talk, of course, about sustainability, climate change being one of the key conversation topics. Now, in Malaysia, for example, those of you who are Malaysians, you know that climate change has adversely affected the way we live. We've had a lot of disasters, so to speak, in terms of flooding, in terms of soil and earth movement. Our weather patterns have changed drastically, and all this is affecting not only the livelihoods of people, but it's also given rise to great concern that if we don't do something about it, then we may not have much in the future to showcase as far as what Asia is famous for, which is our natural resources. The other big question also is how is it going to affect the local populace, most of which are still very much indigenous communities who have very little say or control over their role in this whole climate change conversation. And then last but not least, of course, starting, our journey here towards sustainability. In Asia, we are basically made up of a lot of SMEs, and a lot of our stakeholders in tourism, while they know that climate change is important, there may be a lack of communication or direction when it comes to how are we going to contribute meaningfully towards this sustainability journey. And so I'm going to just share a couple of slides to sort of set the context of this discussion, and then we'll get our esteemed panelists, Frank, who is up at 5 a.m. from the Netherlands. Hello, Frank, to also share a little bit about what climate change means to them and to the ASEAN region. And so on that, I'm just going to go over to my slides. Okay, can everybody see that? Nice and big? Okay, wonderful. So just to kick things off, we're just going to do a bit of an overview. I'm going to be giving a quick introduction to all the panelists, our current journey as far as net zero goals are concerned, some of the challenges we're facing as a nation and maybe a region, and on my part, the role of tour and travel agencies or tour operators in this conversation. So a quick introduction about me. I'm currently serving with the Malaysian Association of Tour and Travel Agents, and our organization is also part of the ASEAN Tourism Association. I come from a tech background. I run a travel agency, online mostly, and we have been involved in some key initiatives during COVID, especially with the Travel Safe Alliance and a working group looking at ASEAN vaccine passport protocols, which thankfully today is no longer necessary. In no particular order, our esteemed speakers, we have Dr. Jitish Kumar, who is the Head of Research, Faculty of Social Sciences and Leisure Management at Taylor's University, of whom Mata is also a partner, and we're very proud to be contributing to the education of students in Taylor's University. His specialization is in economic impact, sustainable tourism, smart tourism, and of course, behavioral studies. His work, he's, I think, got 93 works to his name that has been published, and he's also the Associate Editor for the Asia Pacific Journal of Innovation, Hospitality and Tourism, Regional Editor for Asia in the Event Management Journal, and he is a prolific speaker at many institutions related to tourism. Up next is Mr. Frank Radstack. He is the director at ANVR, which is the Dutch Tourism Association since June 2024 this year, but I've known him for many years now. He was previously the Deputy Director of Consumer Affairs and Social Policy Leader, and he has been involved with ECTA, which is the European Network of Travel Associations. He has also been the chairman of RISE Work since 2017, supporting travel industry professionals and students. And he's currently very active in ECTA's legal, tour operator, and destination and sustainability committees. And last year, the NVR presented a very ambitious and very visionary, if I might add, plan for the future of travel in light of sustainability, with the goal of being net zero in 2050. And last but not least, Puan Rahimah Ali, who is the Head of Sustainability for the Malaysian Aviation Group. We can't have a conversation on climate change without involving our airline partners. She has over 20 years in the aviation industry, and she specializes in strategy, restructuring, operations, quality assurance, and of course, sustainability. And she currently leads MAG's sustainability strategy, reporting and stakeholder engagement. And in our previous session in Malaysia, she has shared some very, very interesting insights into what Malaysia Airlines is doing and how they could be a role model in our journey towards sustainability. So without further ado, a quick introduction about MATA. MATA is the largest tour and travel association in Malaysia. We were founded in 1975, and we cover all aspects of travel. And one of our key achievements is, and that we're known for, is that as a trade organization, we organize very successful platforms both locally and abroad, generating and driving tourism directly with the consumer. Now, moving on to a quick set of statistics, just to give context to this discussion. We're looking at global greenhouse gas emissions by sector, and of course, we're focusing on everything that's tourism related. And if we look at this chart, recently released by Climate Watch, the World Resources Institute in 2020, this research paper basically shows that apart from some of the other areas, aviation in particular contributes about 1.9% of greenhouse gas emissions, and that is likely to grow given that aviation is expected to expand and grow in the next coming couple of years due to demand for travel. Now, overall, one of the biggest contributors to greenhouse gas emissions, of course, is transportation in tourism. And that takes up, according to this study, about 16.2% of contribution. And it's basically one of the highest contributors to GHG emissions globally. Now, about reaching zero, the journey to net zero is approaching its first checkpoint in a couple of years, which is 2030. And according to UN Tourism, the latest research study released by them in December 2019 shows that CO2 emissions just from tourism alone are forecasted to increase by 25% by 2030. Now, as an industry player, we know this to be fairly true because the demand for travel is going to increase, and we're already seeing it increase post-pandemic by leaps and bounds. Now, probably a few facts about where the world stands as far as tourism is concerned. Tourism itself contributes significantly to climate change, I think we all know, accounting for about 8% of global emissions worldwide. We emit nearly about 4.5 billion metric tons of CO2 each year. And of course, we're growing very quickly. Air travel is currently the primary mode of transport and will be for many years to come for international tourism. And it's responsible for approximately 50% of the industry's carbon emissions. So airlines are going to be one of the key areas that's going to receive a lot of focus as far as carbon emissions contributions are concerned. Now, just maybe add a little bit of insight here, and I think Rahima may be able to verify this. The next big hub, which people are saying is going to be the next big mover in terms of people traveling, will be Southeast Asia, as more and more of the population, the younger population, become wealthier. As we all know, the trends basically point out to the fact that younger travelers are going to be more prolific in their travel habits. And so we're expecting to see quite a large boom. We can see a lot of new airlines coming up in Southeast Asia. As we know, China is already starting to expand on their fleets, and the entire industry is expecting a lot more routes, new routes especially, not just older routes, to open just within the Asia-Pacific region. Another quick fact, carbon footprint of global tourism, as you see, what we want to highlight basically is that the global ecotourism industry is estimated at around $117 billion in 2022, and it is forecasted to reach $374 billion by 2028. Now, what this simply means is that there has been a rising trend of people looking for ecotourism products. And while it spells good news for a lot of us, what we're worried about in ASEAN is whether we're ready, to accommodate this demand and do it in the right way. Now, a bit of insight on Malaysia's stance on net zero, especially as far as tourism is concerned. We all know that electricity and heat has always, and I think not just in Asia, but in many parts of the globe, led the emissions, especially in Malaysia, peaking around 2020. Transport emissions have risen over time, especially for Malaysia, because we're beginning to look at moving towards, being more of a transport hub given our geographical location. I think in the recent government budget, we have been looking at perhaps considering Malaysia as one of the new upcoming aviation hubs in Southeast Asia. Now, on that note, there has been a push for the adoption of electric vehicles, although that's going to be a bit tough because of the cost of the vehicles themselves and maybe the lack of proper infrastructure for charging these vehicles. We're looking at high-speed trains as well, but that looks to be coming up maybe over the next 5 to 10 years. So we're not looking at an overnight jump. It may take a while before we are able to replace many of our fossil fuel burning modes of transportation, buses particularly, with cleaner forms of transportation. Now, Malaysia's current policy for net zero 2050 commitments are, we've tried to simplify it as much as possible. We have a national energy transition roadmap, which is expected, which will, be in effect from 2023 up to 2050. And it's looking at a long-term roadmap focusing on sustainable energy transition. What we also want to highlight is our national energy policy, which is a policy framework emphasizing environmental sustainability in energy. So there's been a lot of focus on the energy transition. We also have a green technology master plan, mainly designed to support green technology development and adoption. We have a feed-in tariff mechanism, which was introduced in 2015, and a Renewable Energy Act introduced in 2011, designed to promote renewable energy sources and reduce dependency on fossil fuels. Now, why we're presenting this is that in this whole set of policies, there has not been a very clear indication as to how, whether there are any policies related specifically to tourism, which is a major contributor economically, not just to Malaysia, but to the rest of Southeast Asia and ASEAN. Now, Malaysia's low carbon aspiration for 2040 is a plan to reduce emissions and transition to a lower carbon economy. And this initiative features about 9 targets for 2040, including a 50% shared public transport usage, a 38% EV adoption, use of B30 mixed fuel for heavy vehicles, energy savings for the industry and commercial sectors. And this plan aims to boost GDP by 13 billion annually and to generate 207,000 job opportunities. So while we're promoting a lot of the benefits, of transitioning to a low carbon economy, unfortunately, that itself has yet to be realized in terms of tourism. So what are some of the challenges in Malaysia? In general, we feel that there is a lack of tailored frameworks, meaning while there is this push to promote net zero, there are very few firm frameworks that industries, especially the tourism industry, can basically use as guidelines or as standards, which will help support their journey towards net zero. And so this is one major area where I think our government basically needs to look at. Number 2, there is a lack of standardization in measurement. MATA has recently undertaken to benchmark where most of our tourism players are, travel agents are, in how they are transitioning to a more sustainable set of operations. But there is no Malaysian or national measurement framework specifically designed to measure tourism. Now, while that is not available in Malaysia, we understand that recently UN Tourism has come up with a measurement framework, and we're hoping that this may provide a basis for Malaysia to maybe adopt this on a wider scale, or perhaps to come up with a framework that is more tailored towards how Malaysia is actually going to be measuring our journey in this sustainability journey. Now, some of the other key challenges are funding. So transitioning is not cheap, especially for SMEs. Fortunately, we are not required to do a lot of reporting just yet, but we expect this to change as time goes on. And while there is a lack of funding, that means there is a lack of incentive for many tourism businesses to start early and to prepare their businesses for this eventual requirement. Secondly, there's very limited industry-wide awareness of the importance of the various areas of sustainability. So while there's a lot of talk about not using plastic, being more sustainable in your office operations, there is very little understanding about how the whole supply chain works, and more importantly, the role of travel agents and tour operators in impacting our national net zero goals and how we are going to be able to contribute effectively towards that goal. Last but not least, education on sustainability practices. There is a lack of training and knowledge sharing on sustainable practices across tourism sectors. It has been very isolated. Hotels have their own focus, airlines have their own focus, travel agents have their own focus. But until now, there hasn't been either a government-led initiative or a private sector-led initiative that aims to bind everything together and present a larger picture and more consolidated goals as to how private sector stakeholders and government is going to achieve some of our net zero goals. I won't delve too much into this because a lot of it is already available on the UN Tourism website, but just to say that we need to start by being able to measure, our greenhouse gas emissions as far as the whole tourism supply chain is concerned before we're going to be able to make, informed decisions on which areas we need to tackle and what has priority and what doesn't. Now, I'm going to round it off by just looking at the roles of tour and travel agencies. Some of the things that we can do, given that we are, the people at the front end, we are the ones promoting travel. We actually have a very important role here as far as promoting sustainable travel is concerned. And some of the things that we are promoting as far as MATA is concerned is that we are asking our members to promote low carbon travel to their customers, encouraging to choose low carbon options, especially when it comes to transportation, like using electric means of travel, for example, trains or buses over air travel. And if they are using air travel, to consider airlines that have a carbon offset plan, perhaps, or have something, an ideology, or a focus that appeals to their sense of sustainable travel. Next, we're of course promoting eco-friendly activities and tours, which is what Southeast Asia is famous for. And so we're hoping that if we promote that correctly and we help the local attraction and operators manage these sorts of attractions and packages, that we will be able to not only help these local eco-friendly attractions grow, but grow in a way that minimizes any impact to the environment. And last but not least, we're also encouraging our members to collaborate with industry stakeholders who also have a sustainability plan or agenda. It's the ideology that counts, and to try and promote this across the entire segment of products that we're offering to our customers. And to round it off, MATA is doing this by, again, trying to address some of the gaps in the industry, especially when it comes to cultivating talent and building awareness among consumers and our members. We're encouraging them to also consider looking at certification and standards which they can adopt depending on their own company's ethos and capabilities. And we're also hoping through the help of bodies such as Climate Governance Malaysia and through our partners overseas and locally to actually have a much stronger voice when it comes to driving public policy related to sustainable tourism. And so with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I hope I've been able to give a very brief idea of where we are in Malaysia. Now, moving forward, I'm going to ask and invite our first panelist to give a quick presentation on specifically from where local tourism and culture plays a big role. And for that, I'm going to invite Dr. Jitish Kumar from Taylor's University to take the first seven minutes. So, Doctor, over to you.
Really appreciate. Thank you so much, Nigel, for the kind invitation. It's my pleasure to share some of the activities and the steps forward towards the sustainable tourism and looking after and actually creating. And thank you so much for creating a nice background. Actually, there were a number of things actually which I wanted to cover up, but as you mentioned, the time is very limited, 7 minutes, and that's very crucial actually. So without any delay, let me share my slides. And my focus will be more on attracting eco-conscious traveler and empowering local communities. But of course, it's in the context of sustainable tourism growth as well as natural carbon footprints. You have mentioned in your background, in the introduction, you have mentioned several things, but I was hit with those challenges. The last, probably the second or third last slides actually. So I will try my best to look at those challenges also. And by giving different examples from the Malaysian context in a different states, so what are the steps different stakeholders have taken, beautifully have taken, and what are the positive impacts of those. So again, the impact will be the main focus of my talk. Climate action and the community empowerment for Malaysia. These are the five major points which I'll link into to this particular topic. And empowering a local community. As a tourism academician and researcher, I believe community involvement is a very, very important. It's not only when the policies are made and when we talk about the implementation, but actually at each and every step, the community, because they are the one who are seeing the tourist face to face. But again, connecting to this natural carbon footprints context, or the carbon zero context actually. Malaysia natural carbon sinks and the ecotourism strength. No doubt, we are doing a wonderful job actually, but is it sufficient? Is it enough or not? Such as Kota Kinabalu Park, UNESCO World Heritage Site, serves a key carbon sinks which with a vast tropical forest that absorbs substantial amount of CO2. But as you have mentioned that it's not, we are doing best, but is sufficient or not? We cannot rely only on those tropical or rainforest or those natural parks, that how much the carbon is being absorbed by them alone, because it's not only the tourism which contributes CO2. Actually, there are a number of other entities. Ecotourism initiatives like Langkawi Geopark attracts eco-conscious traveler, generating revenue that directly supports conservation and environmental education, which helps sustain local ecotourism. Again, I want to connect back to your point, because you mentioned about that Southeast Asia, we are going to attract it's a from or to the young tourists actually. And thanks to COVID-19, that everyone become very conscious about their health, about their habits, about their eating habits, about where they are going. So health become conscious, or eco-friendly environment become very important. Projects in a Malaysian mangrove research such as a Kola Sepating Eco Education Center demonstrate how ecotourism funds can be reinvested in preservation efforts, supporting Malaysia commitment to net zero carbon goals. Second point, empowering local communities through sustainable tourism, such as a CBT, community-based tourism initiative in Malaysia. It's not a new context actually. We have been number of initiatives for the last probably more than a decade. But what is the impact of it? Is it sufficient, or we need to do more? Such as those in a Sarawak Cultural Village allows local communities to share their heritage with the visitors, while benefiting economically, strengthening culture preservation as well as the local pride. But making sure that we are sharing the actual authentic experience, an actual authentic heritage, without staging it, without changing the actual phenomena. The third point, I would like to focus on the policy supported climate actions and environmental conservation, such as the MOTEC has introduced policies that emphasize sustainable tourism, aiming to integrate carbon reduction and environmental conservation into national tourism strategy. So it's one of the major policy which is already available. What is that how much it has been implemented and what is the actual impact of it. These policies encourage eco-friendly practices in accommodations, tours, and attractions to minimize the tourism carbon footprints. I will be connecting these points with the second slide where I will be talking about the impact labs in Tellus University, especially the Sustainable Tourism Impact Lab. We have a number of projects and we have checked with the different stakeholders. We have carried forward different projects with the local community for homestay as well as hotels such as 5-star hotels. In terms of the waste management and the different certifications which they have adopted, which they have again, and also in terms of energy saving, etc., and also waste, different types of waste, different types of waters, etc., etc. Aligning tourism policy with the sustainable growth ensures Malaysia's competitive edge in the global ecotourism market. Clear regulatory frameworks and incentive for the sustainable practices encourages the private sector to invest in eco-conscious infrastructure, reinforcing Malaysia's position as a preferred destination for the tourists. Further, the green innovation and hospitality sector. Just now I mentioned the number of hotels and number of accommodations have already adopted these practices because this become a norm and it is in a demand. Actually, it's not only that we have to do this, but the tourists, especially those the conscious, the eco-conscious traveler, they are also checking that which hotel to stay. It's not only that the budget or the rating of the hotels is one of the major concern or the factors which is influencing to their decision making, but this environment friendly hotel is also one of the major concern these days. Malaysia hospitality sector is increasingly adopting green building standards with the properties like Element Kuala Lumpur achieving LEED LEED certification for its energy efficient design, which includes renewable energy sources, water conservation systems, as well as a reduced reliance on the fossil fuels. Eco-friendly hotels like one of the example from Langkawi, Datai Langkawi, implement comprehensive waste minimization programs such as composing, recycling, and waste to energy initiative. That drastically has cut down the landfill contribution and lower overall carbon emissions. Resorts such as Frangipane Langkawi Resorts and Spa have implemented sustainable practices. The owner of this particular resort is doing a marvelous job when we talk about this climate change and so on. The last but not least, the point is promoting environmentally responsible travel through technology. Now, travel where Nigel, you yourself have spent a few minutes when you were talking about the transportation and focusing mainly on the airline. Here, of course, most of the airline have implemented or they are conscious and they have adopted this strategy. But also you mentioned that soon, probably in a couple of years, we will be seeing the number of new airlines and the competition will go on. How exactly we are going to look after this thing? Eco-friendly travel apps like Go Eco promote responsible travel choice by providing travelers with sustainable itineraries, eco-certified accommodations, and tips for low-impact activities, making easier to visitor to engage in environmentally conscious tourism in Malaysia. Also, whenever we talk about these apps or this infrastructure, and recently connecting to the recent budget, actually, which was confirmed, there was a significant amount for the new infrastructure, a maintenance of the old infrastructure. Is it sufficient? And also, this is in a demand actually by the tourists, which are upcoming tourists, young tourists or youth tourists. Smart resources management systems such as those used in the resorts to monitor energy and the water consumption help reduce waste by automatically adjusting usage based on occupancy. This technology-driven efficiency lowers the environmental footprints of hospitality operations and enhances sustainability. Well, it's a very nice to talk about sustainability and this type of technology, but technology comes with a significant cost, and most of the stakeholder in this industry are SMEs. Did they consider significant resources for this type of new infrastructure? Yes, recently we have seen that during the COVID-19, over the night, number of stakeholders have changed strategies. They have adopted something, but not everything actually. But this is in trend. This is in a demand. This is the time where we need to look after. Also, I would like to connect with some of the projects actually which are related to sustainable tourism or this climate change or the net zero CO2. We have 11 impact labs in Thales University. One of the impact lab is a livable urban communities. Of course, there is a time limitation. I won't be going into the depth, but I just want to highlight some of the major projects such as a My Bamboo project. Actually, our researcher from Thales University, along with the stakeholder in the industry, they focused on the activities such as a green public spaces for the community well-being and sustainable bamboo structure under the hub of urban resilience for the climate change. The second project was Gibbon Community Kita urban farms in residential areas, promoting better organization for the spaces as well as a stronger community connection under the same hub in the same impact lab. One of the another project which is innovating heritage environment, actually working together with local stakeholders. The project aims to document and exhibit architectural history to increase the promotion of culture and heritage, actually, that we make sure that we are being advanced, we are having lots of modern technology, but our culture and heritage should be reflected and should be carried forward for the future also. Under the Impact Lab of Sustainable Tourism Impact Lab, one of the project actually which I was leading under my hub together with the hotels and together with the MAAM, the project aims to develop the implement eco-friendly strategies in the hotels to reduce negative environmental impact, and this project was carried forward in 2 5-star hotels in Klang Valley. Another project is cultivating PowerCom. The project aims to promote smart farming practices in Asia. We started from Malaysia, then we still in between under considering with ASEAN region, and our target is to move towards a bigger Asia. Traveling Green is one of the initiative under this Impact Lab to seek and raise awareness and enhance the pro-environmental behavior of the tourist, actually, because each and every stakeholder, it's a job of each and every stakeholder. It's not the job of only the supplier, but of course, those who are the receiver, the tourists should be conscious and they should be educated that what are the good norms to be followed when they are in the field to enjoy, to experience the beauty of Malaysia. The community-based homestay was one of the, this is one of the project actually that aims to elevate the standard of homestay and enhance the quality of life for homestay owners. There is a range of homestay which are registered on Motek sites actually, but there are a number of homestays actually which are doing, which are offering their services, but they are not registered. And also what is the standard in terms of service provision and so on. So this project actually which was making sure that the standard of the quality, the services should be in line, and also making sure that local community should be empowered by this particular initiative. With that regard, thank you so much, and I welcome all the questions, and we will be having a good discussion later after.
Thank you, Dr. Jitesh. Unfortunately, 1 hour is not much time, but thank you for that. If you have any questions, just type it into the chat and we'll be happy to answer them. Without further ado, I'd like to invite Puan Rahimah from the Malaysian Aviation Group up next to give us a quick oversight into the aviation industry. Rahimah, over to you.
Thank you so much, Nigel and also Shakira. Okay. All right, maybe we can go straight to the second slides, just for the context and for everyone, because sometimes I'm being asked, sustainability for Malaysia Aviation Group, we are actually at a holding. We actually look into all the businesses. So you know that we actually have few airline under us. We have Malaysia Airlines, we have Firefly, Maswing, and also we have aviation services. So let me go to this slide. Aviation industry is complex, because we actually have our entire supply chain. We actually communicated with a lot of different stakeholders. We are not able to move actually if we don't communicate, and we have proper interlink communication with the government, with the industry stakeholder, with the tourisms, with the our own customer, also passengers. It require interlink and multidimensional when it comes to our even sustainability effort. So if I can go to the next slide. Nigel mentioned a lot about data that he shared. I think was very insightful for our participants today. In brief, climate change, we know is affect not only our industry, but also it's also affect country, and actually is impacting every industry in the globe. And for us, for example, we need to ensure that Nigel shared a lot about GHG data. I'm not sharing that today because I find I'm scared it was a bit too technical. But we ourselves also have a detailed calculation about our own GHG and how do we want to decarbonize our organization. Global emission for aviation is about 2 to 3%, but the need to travel is really crucial. So certain of the data that we can see, for example, like aviation industry, way back in 2017, based on ICAO data, we actually carry about 4.1 billion passengers across the globe. So the numbers is good, but what's most important is with the number is also in an increasing trend when it comes to carbon emission. Every time we carry more, every time we actually fly more, we are actually emitting carbon. But it's also crucial because the entire aviation industry not only actually connecting people, it's also actually contribute to GDP and also a job creation for the aviation industry. Thus, the requirement for travel we know is there. So it's very important for us to actually find a way how to decarbonize the aviation industry. So let's move to my next slide. This is a ETIC waypoint 2050. So this gives aviation industry is very structured, very niche, I will say. That's the way we want to decarbonization. We only have 5. There are certain airlines who are doing 5 or 6, but these are the key decarbonization roadmap for us. First is technology. Technology basically is coming out with the new technology of aircraft, hydrogen, electrification. They're going to help in the decarbonization. The other one is operation and infra. This is purely the way you actually operate the aircraft, the way the airport is being structured. So it involves a lot of third party as well. So that gives usually about 10%. Most of the airline are doing at about 2 to 3% currently. Even this is the maximum that you can potentially achieve. The other important one is actually sustainable aviation fuel. This is one of the key important factor in our decarbonization. It gives 80% reduction in CO2 as compared to conventional jet fuel that we are using now. And of course, if we do all the three, we are not able to actually minimize our CO2 emission. We will actually do the market-based measure where we actually will do a carbon trading. Next slide. Our effort basically for all the 4, we have done a lot. For example, we do fuel efficiency program. We actually are using electrification ground vehicle to push back aircraft. This is all to actually assist in our decarbonization. we actually bought 25 Boeing 737-8, which is coming in staggered to our system. We bought aircraft A330neo, which will start coming into our fleet from end of this year. So why all this fleet technology is important? Because it is giving an efficiency 11 to 14% of fuel less from our current consumption. So that's quite huge for us. And of course, the third one is SAF. And the last one is actually carbon offsetting. So for all the 4 decarbonization roadmap that we have, Malaysia Airlines for the past 4 years, I would say, have been very rigorous in doing everything so that we are able to actually minimize our greenhouse gases impact. But for today's discussion, the other two, I only have another 2 or 3 slides. But what's important in the following slide is that how we want to empower our travelers with a sustainable choices. Next slide, where one of the way that we are doing now is actually we are producing our annual report, sharing about all our effort. But I will say that our key take up stakeholder when it comes to our aviation, our reporting is actually financial institution and our key supply chain partner, who will always be waiting for the report, because that's where after the production of the report there will be a lot of query on our effort. I think that's very business related. Social media, this is where we are trying to actually go to our customer so that they know that these are the sustainable options that you have. You are able to actually, what are the effort we are doing and what are the options that you have. So even on board, if you see that you'll be slowly seeing that we have introduced wooden cutleries, there's a lot of feedback, but we need to buy the bullet, because if we really want to go into sustainability, there are certain decisions that we need to make. We use a lot of plastics on board. We have single-use plastic. We also have plastic actually that can be recycled. So there is a program of 36 months that we are looking through so that we can slowly remove plastic so that our customer have a choices and able to see that we are actually moving all this. And if you have the privilege in traveling in business class, you will see that we have collaborated with BMW, where we provide services, fully electrical car vehicles, BMW, to actually provide transportation from your main terminal building to a satellite building for you to use electrification. So these are all the choices that we actually provide to our customer. My next slide. The other options that we are giving is we have customers and also corporate that we are working with who are very particular and who want to actually ensure that when they travel green. So they will be asking from us, okay, I would like to travel, but I want to be a responsible citizen. I want to make sure I offset. So hence we actually have this carbon voluntary program to our passenger, where every time you travel, you are able to actually offset your travel. And this program, actually, we invested into a carbon project. And of course, we are happy because we actually do have a Malaysian project that we are able to proceed to actually offset the carbon. So this is a very important program. I would say that the take-up rate on our country is less as compared to the customer that we have the other part of the region, Australia, New Zealand, UK, Europe. I would say that the awareness and educational about the importance of climate change is a bit more that side. So the customer would like to offset most of their travel as compared to our side yet. But we are still doing a lot of marketing to ensure that we are able to educate our customer here the importance of offsetting. So let's go to my last slide, where what are the challenges that we are facing? Started this journey, but we are also having the challenges, for example, customer perception, because sometimes every time you introduce something new on board, the first mindset is that are they cutting costs? actually they have to realize that if we are doing anything biodegradable, in fact, removing plastics, actually it's a bit more expensive. It's more expensive from the current that we have. But the perception is why they are making these changes. This is not beneficial. I would like to actually have my different cutleries. So the customer perception is all about mindset, behavior, and awareness that why we are doing this. This is part of our challenges. We are still facing these challenges, but we are also, that's why the social media platform is important, because we always try to actually go back so that we can able to educate our customer. The other option is sustainable options. These I would say, currently we do have very simple. If you go, I will link this bullet point again with my fourth bullet point about the green options that we have for our product and services. Sometimes there are certain items on board where we would like to be totally biodegradable, but there's no option at all. So we have to stick with the non-sustainable option for the moment, because I think the technology is not there yet. So that are part of the challenges that we have to live with it. But we also have certain options, but the prices are prohibitive. For example, sustainable aviation fuel. Jet fuel is almost 1/3 of our cost. So it's a very important and high cost for us for aviation business. And imagine if you have to take sustainable aviation fuel, that is 3 to 5 times from our current jet fuel. That's only the premium. So you can imagine the challenges the aviation industry are facing. We operate in a very thin margin, and again, the going to sustainable options is very expensive. It's as good as you're not in the business. So it's a very tricky situation for us to make decision here. Operational constraint, I think we have been structured because we have to operate at the airport. We have to work with a lot of our supply chains. Certain of our infra is not even ready for making certain changes. So I would say that is few challenges that I would like to put in, because I think going to relate with our discussion later on. That's my last slide. Thank you, Nigel. I hope that it benefit to the team and also to the attendees today. Thank you.
Thank you, Rahima. And I know we're running a bit short on time, but we are going to round this off with actually a presentation from Frank, and we would like to hear what's happening in Europe and how this may actually help us down here in the Southeast Asian region. So Frank, over to you, my friend.
Thank you very much. Can I be heard?
Loud and clear.
Perfect. Very, very, very good. Thank you very much. And thank you for my 5 to 7 minutes, Nigel. I will try to wrap it up in time. Yes, thank you. Great to be in Malaysia again, even though from the Netherlands on a very cold Dutch morning. Before I show a few slides, I just have a couple of slides. Just to set the context a little bit, because I don't think we will have much discussion time left after my presentation. A week ago today, I was on Dutch national television on the most well-known political debate program, where I had to defend the position of travel industry that we should be allowed to advertise our product, because people in the Netherlands are moving towards a full advertisement ban on all fossil products, and for our industry, for air travel and for cruise travel. So I had to defend the industry position that we are against an advertisement ban. Again, a couple of days ago on national radio, I had to give my opinion on the statement that long-haul holiday travel should be banned immediately. After I was on television, after I was on the radio, online, I've been called a climate saboteur and a murderer. Just to give you an idea of how the debate in the Netherlands is going. So once we were formulating our sustainability ambitions, which we have on a few slides, do know and be aware that the discussions that we're having in the Netherlands when it comes to travel industry are firmly based in a very activist Dutch society that sees, even though we just contribute 2 to 3% to the global emissions, even though it's just that percentage, we are seen as the root of evil. We have a very strange situation. Dutch people love to travel. We travel more than ever, but a very small, very activist group has been able to hijack the national debate quite firmly. So last year, we started to come up with ambitions. We have our sustainability ambitions based not solely, but firmly in scientific rooting. And what we want to be in 2050 is on the next slide. And then in 2050, we want to have a positive impact worldwide with our tourism, social, economic, and ecological value. And we contribute to travel destinations. We work transparent. So we're showing what we're doing, and we're showing impact of travel. And we show leadership as the travel industry throughout the whole chain. So what does that mean on the next slide, just in 3 quick statements? You showed me the next slide, so I can show exactly. So we've got 3 pillars. One is that we want to be net zero by 2050 as the travel outbound industry. And to be able to do that, we have to start with immediate emission reduction. We saw in the previous contribution by Fayan that it's absolutely necessary to start immediately via sustainable aviation fuels, via electrification, via behavioral change of travelers. But we have to start with immediate emission reduction as Dutch travel industry if we want to reach the net zero goal in 2050. But sustainability, even though today we're talking about climate, is much more than just climate. It's also ecological and social sustainability. So the second pillar is sustainability throughout the whole supply chain. And when it comes to the destination, and I think that Dr. Jatish was talking about that as well, when it comes to regenerative tourism, we want to have a positive impact on all destinations that we sell to our customers. So in the next slide, it's going to be a very interesting slide, and I'm not asking you to see everything that's there, but I told you that we had our ambition in 2050. So if you have an ambition in 2050, how do you get there? So we use the principle of backcasting. So we looked back from 2050 to today. What are all the steps that we have to take if we want to be net zero by 2050? So we looked at business travel, we looked at European haul tour operators, we looked at long haul tour operators, we looked at the emission part, and we looked at the more social part of sustainability. So we came up with these roadmaps towards 2030, and we have very smart goals which we want to reach in 2027 to start with. I've got a few examples on my next slide. Yeah, so one of the first things that we're going to do is we're going to be radically transparent about the impact of travel. So the first thing that we need is a uniform data set of emissions. What is the emission set that belongs with, for example, a flight from Amsterdam to Malaysia, depending on whether you fly with KLM or with Malaysian, whether you take a direct flight or an indirect flight. So we need all that information. There's loads of information out there, but if you want to be transparent, we all have to work with the same data set. So within the European Union, we have the CSRD. It's a reporting directive that is an obligation for companies to be actually transparent about the impact and what they are doing to minimize their impact. And we try to come up with a reporting system that's aligned with European legislation. And we've decided to report on our impact on a day basis. So it's actually the CO2e per person per travel day. Why is that? Otherwise, if you go to Malaysia from the Netherlands, it will always look worse than if you go to Greece from the Netherlands. Whereas if you go to Malaysia 3 weeks versus 4 days to Greece from the Netherlands, actually the impact per day is much lower. So we think it's much more fair to come up with an impact per day. And what we would like is 2 things. One, for companies to report on their global total impact, but also to report on the impact per trip to the customer, and also offer the alternatives if they are available. Of course, if you go to Malaysia, you can't go by train or bus, but if you travel within Europe, those alternatives might be there. So last slide. One of the things that we did is come up with a position paper on trains, because whereas going to Malaysia, as I said, the train isn't an alternative. Within Europe, it could be an alternative, but it is not really there because the European Union isn't facilitating the development of trains like, for example, China has been doing. That's very unfortunate that we have all these struggles, because the willingness to travel by train in Europe is very high. And it might actually be faster than traveling by plane if it's under 750 kilometers. So what we are trying to do to reach our goals is not just to be transparent, we need behavioral change, and we need the innovation that Ms. Fajan Ramir was talking about already. So behavioral change, we need the local and the European government to help us with alternatives. And we're starting right away. So just within 7 minutes, Nigel. There you go.
Thank you, Frank. Look, thanks to all the panelists. We're going to just quickly round up with one quick question to each panelist because we are already out of time. So I'm just going to quickly present a quick question to Frank, and then it's related. I'm going to go over to Dr. Jitesh and Rahima. We'll just keep it nice and short fire, straight to the point. And the question, Frank, is given what the ANVR is already doing and where Europe is heading with this whole sustainability movement, you're far more ahead in Europe than you are, for example, than we are in Asia, Southeast Asia in particular. Now, if I were to ask you, what is one of the most crucial things that variables or an environment or a policy, whatever it may be, what is the one most crucial thing that actually helps local businesses and tourism stakeholders jump on board and actually put a lot of these plans into practice? You know, is it funding? Is it policy? What is it that's key in Europe here?
Well, I think, Nigel, not to help you, it starts with a very strong sector organization that is able to unite all players. Because if everyone's going to do it by themselves, Dr. The Chiefs will have a million nice examples in a few years, but we're still not getting anywhere. We need to change as travel industry. We need to change as tourism, not just the individual companies. Of course, it has to be bottom up as well, but we need to come up with a comprehensive plan where we are going. If we're not doing that, then politics are going to decide for us. So work together within your organization and work together with government.
Thank you, Frank. That just reinforces the fact that what we need to do in Malaysia here is drive the conversation. Rahima, on your side, right? Same question with Frank. What's lacking in our Malaysian context here? What's really holding the whole movement back, whether it's in the public or the private sector?
Thank you, Nigel. For me, I think there's two. One is to actually have certain national policy, which currently we are working together with MOT, KPK, Ministry of Economy to ensure that what's required for us to move forward. The other one I would say is public awareness. On our side, I think that's very important still to ensure that public awareness of why we are doing this is very important for everyone because it's involved everyone, not just government and public sector. So I would say that one is certain specific national policy and also the public awareness on what we are doing. Thank you.
Thanks, Rahima. Appreciate that. Dr. Jitesh, same question over to you. I mean, Rahima was looking at it from a transportation perspective, but what about some of the other local stakeholders, the smaller stakeholders and industry in general, you know? What is your take on some of the key challenges we face and what do we need to do in order to overcome this?
Thank you, Nigel. What I learned actually from two of the panelists, actually, that's interesting and I believe contradictory because where Rahima was mentioning about the offset, actually, I as a traveler need to pay actually, but I'm a cost-conscious traveler. Okay, so of course, I mean, how be effective. If I'm a business traveler, then it's a different thing actually. That definitely I have to mention that this is what we will not only talk about sustainability, we practice. And second thing, again, funding. Because what I mentioned, we talk about sustainability and we talk about technology actually, but it's not free and it's not cheap also. So we need to look after what are the different strategies we can look into, such as strengthening partnership and networks actually. Of course, SMEs such as a homestay or one small hotelier actually cannot implement these strategies. But if they share resources, if there is a pool of hotelier with the same level, actually, they can share the resources that this will be the way of waste management. This will be the way, so they can come up with the local strategies, actually, localized strategies or the standard what that particular level of hotels or the stakeholders needs to follow. And of course, leverage it on digital platforms to look after those environmental educations. Again, I don't want to repeat the same thing, but it's not only one stakeholder's job. It's each and everyone's jobs. Making sure that we are conscious, those as a supplier and those who are the receiver, they are enough educated that this is their job. When they can house clean, why they cannot keep that particular location clean where they came only for a particular time period. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jitish. And once again, thanks to all the panelists for your time, and I hope this information has been informative, and we look forward to engaging in the future. So with that, I'll hand this session back to the MC. Shen, over to you.
Thank you very much,
you.
Nigel. Right, thanks to all our speakers, panelists, and participants who have contributed today. Now, as we close, it's clear that collaboration, innovation, and leadership will be key in shaping a very sustainable future. Let's carry the conversations forward and continue to work together toward a resilient, low-carbon Malaysia. Let's continue tomorrow on day 2 with the theme, Let's Just Transition. On behalf of all involved, thank you for the time and commitment. Take care and see you tomorrow again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.